The Lord of Mages, I ruined the tech tree. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, Beginning to Inherit the Title. The biting cold wind mixed with a faint light at dawn swept across the towering castle on the river bank. As the actual ruler of Antolia, Viscount Antolia Arthur Ximena has always been in this castle, outlining the Ximena family's rule over the Thorn territory and the entire Antolia. Under the beating of wind and rain, every brick and stone on the castle records the mottled marks of the years, and the dark red bloodstains on the brick walls show the chaos and fragmentation of this land. At this moment, the flames of the fireplace are burning, but it is still difficult to erase the depression in the castle. A doctor in a black robe, a priest holding a cross, and a group of burly mercenaries are surrounding a heavy bed, discussing the treatment method fiercely. On the bed, a scarred burly man is breathing hard, and his stubbled face reveals a trace of obvious paleness. This is a man with a certain status in this castle, usually called Viscount Antolia, Arthur Ximena. But now, the Viscount's face has long lost its former spirit, and his pale face makes the wrinkles on his face more and more distinct. Viscount, we need to continue bleeding you. After a heated discussion, the doctor and the priest finally reached an agreement. More bleeding. Looking at the Viscount who was already dying in front of them, the mercenaries surrounding the bed could not help but raise their battle axes, and the sharp axe blades kissed the doctor's neck. The doctor felt that his voice became a little trembling, only a little bit. Only in this way can the bile that makes the Viscount feel so painful flow away. Let it go. At this moment, a weak voice came from the Viscount's mouth. Seeing that the Viscount agreed, the doctor carefully pushed away the axe blade that had left a blood mark on his neck, picked up a sharp knife, held his breath, and gently scratched the Viscount's forearm. Instantly, several streams of blood flowed out of the Viscount's arms, making his face even paler. God will bless his people. The priest prayed devoutly. Will the Viscount get better? If the Viscount can wake up, it means that his piety has moved the great God. If not, it means that his frail body can hardly bear the blessing of God. The priest finished his last words in the world, and then, the sword fell, and the bright red blood soaked his white holy robe. Antolians never believe in gods. The mercenary in front of the bed wiped the blood on the weapon, and the unique smell of blood filled the room. Seeing the priest beside him die tragically on the spot, the doctor immediately collapsed on the ground in fear, unable to help, sobbing, "Gentlemen, please let me go. I am just a doctor from the Principality of Norton. I am really just passing by. I promise not to come to Antolia again. Once I cure the Viscount, I will naturally let you go." The leading mercenary was not moved at all. Todd. The Viscount, who was dying, tried his best and made a dull cry. "Go to Parma City and bring Leon back." Compared with the remote and desolate Antolia, as the largest city in the southwest of the Kingdom of Andal, Parma City under the rule of the Duke of Galicia is prosperous. Towering wizard towers stand in the city, and countless carriages and horses are bustling. This is where the largest number of wizards in the south of the kingdom gathers, and therefore it has become a place where León Ximena, the only son of the Viscount of Antolia and the wizard apprentice, studies. Going south from the Duke's castle in the center of the city, through the rich area with magnificent white brick spires, and through the civilian area with muddy roads and the stench of sewage, you can see the sturdy and spacious gate of Parma. Going east along the path outside the city gate for dozens of kilometers, as the villages on both sides of the road become more and more sparse, the largest cemetery in Parma is already in sight. The pines and cypresses that should have been evergreen have long been dried up, and only an abandoned church stands in the center of the cemetery. Leon, a wizard apprentice and the son of a Viscount, has no interest in studying the boring history of magic in the wizard tower. And Leon's teacher, the great wizard Albert, doesn't care about this. Anyway, even if Leon doesn't learn magic well, he can go home and inherit the title. Why should he be too strict with a future Viscount? So, during his days of studying in Parma, this cemetery on the outskirts of the city became Leon's favorite place. In this fantasy world full of magic and weirdness, abandoned cemeteries are almost the setting for all horror stories, but Leon doesn't care about it. At this moment, he is walking alone between the tombstones, and his originally light blue eyes reveal a strange paleness. If there are passers-by at this time, they will definitely see a wizard in a black robe, waving his staff aimlessly in the empty cemetery, like a madman. But in Leon's unique vision, countless swaying black shadows are approaching him with their teeth and claws. They have a rough body formed by the black fog, slender limbs and sharp fangs, clinging to the dry and hard ground, and floating around the cemetery. So fierce, it's like the drunkard dad was carved out of the same mold. Leon waved a staff in his hand, and in the blink of an eye, he stuffed a shadow monster approaching him with its teeth and claws into the crystal-clear bottle in his hand. The shadow monster thrown into the bottle immediately turned into a ball of black mist, hitting the runes on the bottle from time to time. Today's harvest is not bad. Leon counted the 7 small bottles he carried with him. In each bottle, there was a ball of black mist swaying in panic. Then, his mind moved, and the scenery in front of him changed rapidly. After a dizzy moment as if he had stepped into a wormhole, Leon was already in a black and white world shrouded in black mist. This seemed to be a world supported by black marble columns. The chandelier above the head hung from the boundless black mist, emitting a dim halo through the diffuse mist. On the wall not far away, dried blood and ancient stone carvings wrote the name of this area, the Ancient Archives. Leon's sight passed through the hazy black mist and vaguely saw the bookshelves and machinery standing not far away. Beside him, countless shadow monsters were greedily swallowing the black fog blocking their way, licking the embers of black fog left on the books bit by bit. Leon immediately released the shadow monsters he had just collected in the cemetery from the bottle. These strange creatures were precisely the means to disperse the black fog and enable him to go deep into the archives. If Leon was right, the area in front of him was his golden finger as a time traveler. After collecting shadow monsters over the years, the black fog in front of Leon has become thinner and thinner, so that Leon can almost see through the black fog and vaguely distinguish the words on the covers of the books. However, now is obviously not the time to read. Calm down and return to the cemetery. Leon sorted out the empty crystal bottle, then got on the horse and galloped towards the direction of Parma. If you go back too late, you will miss the time for the daily dinner in the Mage Tower. But just in front of the door of the Mage Tower, an unexpected figure blocked Leon's way. Master Leon, it's time to go back and inherit the title. New author, please read. Chapter 2. The Golden Finger is finally here. The people of Anatolia usually have very distinct characteristics. Take Todd in front of us for example. He lost his left eye in a fight with a forest wolf and lost his ring finger in the process of suppressing a peasant rebellion. Not to mention the scar on his face, his waist as thick as a bucket, his height of nearly 2 meters, and his arms as strong as Leon's thighs, look like a giant bear from a distance. It is really hard not to be impressed. Master Leon, please forgive me for speaking frankly, the Viscount probably can't hold on any longer. In Leon's room, Todd said with great sorrow, the master went out hunting a few days ago, but because he drank too much, he fell into the water without paying attention. You know, most of the people in Anatolia are landlubbers. Although the Viscount was rescued in the end, his life was already in danger. I took people to temporarily kidnap a doctor, but I didn't expect that the bastard only knew how to bleed. This time I came to Parma City, I received the Viscount's order to take you home. Leon sat aside and listened quietly, and was speechless for a while. Now it happened to be the most difficult year of the jackdaw in Anatolia, and his cheap father accidentally died. It was really a double whammy. But the father is the father after all. Although he is a time traveler, the blood flowing in his body is the blood of the Ximena family after all. For a while, he couldn't help but stand there. I will go back tomorrow, Leon said immediately. Leon had no nostalgia for the city of Parma. Perhaps because he was a time traveler, Leon basically lived a life of eating and waiting to die in the Mage Tower. Although he was called a mage apprentice, his comprehension of magic was not high, and at most he could perform some of the most basic and simple magic. If he really wanted to learn magic, he had to rely on his own golden fingers. As the largest city in the southwest of the kingdom, although there were luxurious houses and numerous mage towers, there were also countless serfs and civilians on the verge of death. This was a place of prosperity and wealth, but also a place of filth and dirt. The idle nobles vividly demonstrated how chaotic ethical relationships could be, which made Leon, an outstanding young man in the new era, dumbfounded. The only thing that Leon missed was probably the large cemetery outside the city and those cute shadow monsters. But Anatolia also had these things. And more. Shadow monsters are the embodiment of death and fear, and there is no shortage of death in the chaotic Anatolia, so there are naturally no shortage of floating shadow monsters. Especially after Leon's intensive cultivation over the years, The shadow monsters in Parma City have almost become endangered species, and the number of people killed by shadow monsters has dropped drastically. So much so that the Duke of Galicia once believed that there was an unnamed great wizard living in Parma City, and increased the subsidy for wizards for 3 consecutive years. After arranging a place for Todd, who came from afar, and having someone reinforce the bed, Leon returned to his room. Looking at the city outside the window that was still shrouded in the night, Leon suddenly felt confused and hesitant. He didn't have much contact with his cheat father. But that was his father in this world after all, and he left him a hereditary fiefdom belonging to the Ximena family. Ximena family. Leon's mood was extremely complicated, but he still made a decision silently: it will definitely not fall in my hands. The next day, when the morning light shines through the thick clouds and sprinkles on the muddy road of Palma, Leon Ximena gets on the carriage to Antalya. Although the journey is long and there are only Leon and Todd, there must be no blind robbers who dare to run into the vicious Todd. Leon in the carriage also took this opportunity to enter the area called the Ancient Archives. For this area, Leon once doubted whether this was a special space in his mind or a layer parallel to the real world. But it is meaningless to explore this issue now, as long as his gold finger can be used. Who'll study the electrical structure of the room before turning on the light? And then learn electrical knowledge again? Returning to the Ancient Archives, perhaps due to the qualitative change caused by quantitative change, the originally diffused black fog retreated several meters in just one day, revealing not only the ancient bookshelves, but also many old instruments that Leon had never seen before. Leon tried to touch the books that were once out of reach, and his fingertips felt a unique touch of rubbing brown paper. This time, he was not bounced back to the real world by the diffuse black fog. He took out a miscellany from the bookshelf, and the content surprised Leon. The unspeakable demon is approaching Lorraine. The despicable and shameless thief who stole the country broke through the defense line. The army led by Blair is approaching the royal city. The great General Blair arrived in his loyal Yalin. This is obviously not a French joke. Not only is it not a joke, but it makes Leon's body tremble a little. Because in these chaotic sentences, Leon saw a familiar place named Yalin. In the entire continent, there is only one country with Yalin as its royal city, that is, the country established by the ancestors thousands of years ago, that era when there was no written record and civilization was highly developed. And now, the former royal city of Yalin is located on the land abandoned by the gods, hidden in the diffuse black fog. For many years, no adventurer has dared to set foot on it. Wait! The pervasive black fog, the former royal city. Leon looked around. A possibility suddenly emerged in his mind. Could it be that the place where he was now was? Leon shook his head immediately. This is impossible. If he had come to the former royal city, how could he explain that he was just in a deep sleep in the real world, rather than disappearing out of thin air? After dispelling the messy thoughts in his mind, Leon immediately began to look for other books that might be useful to him in this archive. The history of the past is certainly worth exploring, but it is of no help to him in taking over Anatolia next. It takes dozens of days to get from Parma to Anatolia, which is enough for him to figure out the golden finger. As for those old scientific instruments, before finding the possible instructions in the book in front of him, Leon dared not act rashly. So, they hurried all the way, and when the two finally stepped into Anatolia, Leon really found a few useful things in the archive. For example, Black's oil generation technique, and scientific instrument operation manual. New author, please read on, Sob. Chapter 3, Antalya doesn't support idle people. Antalya is a special place. Although the mountains in the south block most of the black fog from the abandoned land, some of the black fog will cross the barrier of mountains and rivers, allowing a large number of biological communities different from those in the kingdom to appear on this land. Passing through the moon mushroom forest that stretches for dozens of kilometers, you can see a winding river in the distance. The White Blade River. In the dead of winter, the bodies of Highland hounds and their broken canine teeth will float down the river under the embrace of the water flow. This river, which is regarded as the source of life by the Anatolians, is named for this reason. The thorns have been received. Along the White Blade River, heading west, accompanied by taunts shouts, a castle located on the riverbank came into view. Unlike the ancient castles in the kingdom with bright spires and gorgeous carvings, the castle built along the river in front of you is like a pancake spread on the ground. There is a not-so-tall round tower at each corner. There are very few windows on the brick and stone exterior walls. The only windows are more like neatly arranged arrow holes. Outside the castle, in addition to the warriors of the Ximena family, there was also the coffin of Viscount Arthur Ximena of Antolia, who is waiting for Leon. Master Leon, the Viscount died 3 days ago. Aaron, the old butler of the Ximena family, said this to Leon, who was exhausted from the journey. The people of Antolia never believed in gods. So there were no churches here, let alone burials. The hounds from the highlands had already mastered the skills of digging the ground and digging graves in this difficult environment. The burials commonly seen in the Andal kingdom would only mean that the deceased would not rest in peace after death. The Viscount's guards used the collected firewood to build a high platform outside the city, and the coffin made of pine wood had been waiting for Leon's return. Light the fire. After standing in front of the coffin for a long time, Leon finally gave the order. In an instant, the flames rose, the burning firewood made a crackling sound, and the people present sang the ballad of Antolia softly. Thick smoke billowed into the sky, and the cold winter wind blew away the ashes. When the funeral was over, Antolia finally welcomed a new ruler, Viscount Antolia, León Ximena. Inside the castle, all the wise men were present. The flickering flames danced on the candlesticks, casting the shadow of the curtains on the damaged armor hanging on the wall. Leon's eyes swept over the people present. Even though he had traveled through time for many years, whenever Leon looked at these warriors who were loyal to the Ximena family, he would still feel irrepressible amazement in his heart. In short, without a physique of more than 200 pounds, it would be embarrassing to say that you are loyal to the Ximena family outside. The fatal injury seemed to be just a business card for these people to enter the castle. The barrel waist and thick arms had long become the standard of the Viscount's guards. Even Todd, who was as strong as a giant bear in the city of Parma, seemed a little mediocre among these people, as if everyone had the blood of orcs flowing in their bodies. Of course, there are exceptions. The old butler Aaron was squinting his eyes, sitting on a wide wooden chair near the fireplace. Almost all the objects in the entire castle are oversized. The thick and warm wool blanket draped over Aaron's body is like a swaddling cloth wrapped around a baby, covering his old and thin body layer by layer. The dwarf Sherman sat on the edge of the door crack, writing and drawing on the croft paper with a feather pen in his hand. The cold wind that squeezed in from the door crack swept across his bald head, and his sharp nose like an eagle's claw twitched from time to time, making the chief craftsman who designed the Thorn Territory castle and forged many weapons keep his mind clear at all times. This year is the year of the jackdaw? Todd, the captain of the guard, spoke first, adding a touch of depression to the territory that had just lost the old Viscount. The year of the jackdaw is a specialty of Antolia. It comes every 5 years and has never been absent for many years. 2.5 years, 2 years belong to it. In the year of jackdaw, hounds from the southwest highlands would go down the White Blade River. The severe winter cold made these bloodthirsty beasts hungry. So in Antolia, the year of jackdaw often meant cruel killings. Although the Viscount of Antolia would prepare food for the winter in advance, the food was always not enough. So, there was never a lack of death in the barren Antolia. Fortunately, the harsh and barren natural environment made this land a fish that slipped through the net under the feudal fiefdom system. The entire Antolia region had only one city surrounding the castle of the Thorn Territory. None of the people present were vassals, but family servants, so that Leon's orders could be conveyed to every citizen in the first place. How much money and food do we have now? Leon asked. Since he had been studying in Parma for many years, Leon did not know the current situation of the territory, so he naturally had to ask first. Aaron, who had been dozing by the fireplace, finally lifted the heavy blanket that was draped over him. With the help of the waiter, he slowly stood up and said with some concern, "The winter of the jackdaw year will be exceptionally long. According to past experience, this year's cold winter will last for more than 4 months. And the current food reserves in the territory are only enough for the territory's expenses for 2.5 months. Hearing this, Leon couldn't help but frown slightly. What about the purchase of food? I remember that my father had been purchasing food for the winter in the earldom near Antolia. My lord Viscount, Aaron said with a wry smile, in addition to food, the territory's currency is not abundant. How could this be? Since the end of the Second Reconquista, the kingdom has not had a large-scale war for 3 consecutive years. Aaron's voice was a little regretful, and the faces of the people present also showed an unspeakable loss. Mercenaries are a specialty of Antolia. In the chaotic environment, The Antolians have long been accustomed to the days of licking blood on the tip of a knife and are accustomed to being accompanied by death. It is no exaggeration to say that the figures of the Antolians can be seen on any battlefield in the kingdom. Because this has always been the only way for the Antolians to obtain money and food and survive on this land. Don't worry, Viscount, the food problem can be solved with the old method. At this time, Todd, the captain of the guard, said in a deep voice. As soon as the voice fell, the strong men present cheered like the roar of wild beasts. Some of them slapped the long table in front of them with their palms, and some raised their clenched fists. For a time, the hall of the castle was noisy, and the wildness of the Antolians was visible. Leon certainly knew what the so-called old method was, which was nothing more than close combat with those ferocious beasts. The hounds from the southwest highlands were indeed ferocious, but as long as they were all killed, they would get enough meat for the winter. With fewer people eating and more food for the winter, the year of the jackdaw would naturally pass. But now, Leon wanted to change a way to spend the upcoming long winter. The population number at the beginning is often criticized by readers. Give me some time, I will carefully find out where the population number is mentioned, and then make changes. However, the population number is quickly increased through other means in the following chapters. 2023-9-5. Chapter 4 Moon Mushrooms and Scientific Instruments. Leon did not stop Todd's proposal. It is always good to prepare multiple ways. After returning to Anatolia after many years, even if Leon had some ideas in his mind, he was not sure whether his ideas were feasible. After the guards and retainers who were eager to try left one after another, Aaron, who had always been standing aside, asked, "The Viscount seemed to have something in mind before, but do you have a plan to deal with it?" "I have an idea, but I don't know if it is feasible." Leon did not intend to hide anything from the loyal butler in front of him. Aaron is not only the butler of the Ximena family, but also the butler of the entire Viscount of Anatolia. In any case, Leon's ideas need Aaron to implement them. Viscount Arthur once said that only by constantly obtaining new sources of income and recruiting more people can the family remain strong forever. It is naturally a good thing that you are willing to take over the territory and keep trying. It's just... Aaron changed the subject and said, "The family has too many places to spend money at the moment. If the Viscount has any ideas, I hope you can control the expenditure within 300 escudos. 1 golden escudo is equivalent to 100 Andal silver coins, both of which are the common currency of the Andal kingdom." "Don't worry, Uncle Aaron." Leon smiled and said, "It doesn't take that much money. Instead of worrying about the money bag in your hand, you might as well help me find a few moon mushroom trees first." "Moon mushroom trees?" "That's right." Leon nodded seriously. Although he has become the Viscount of Anatolia, Leon still habitually returned to his old room. There are no gorgeous low curtains, no exquisite sculptures, and no golden candlesticks inlaid with gems. On the contrary, the room was filled with heavy wooden tables, simple and wide wooden beds, bearskin carpets and deer antlers hanging on the walls, showing a strong Anatolian style. Opening the tightly closed wooden window, through the narrow window, the appearance of most of the city was revealed in front of Leon. Because there were wild beasts, robbers and various dangers outside the city, most of the people lived crowdedly in the city centered on the Thorn Territory Castle. This also made Leon's lord's castle almost mixed with a civilian area. Not far away, wooden houses were lined up one after another, and the air was filled with the smell of livestock feces. Leon sniffed, and then closed the window neatly. If it was open for a while longer, the room might not be able to stay. It must be said that Aaron's efficiency is commendable. Not long after, the castle guards, full of doubts, held a newly cut moon mushroom tree in their arms and stepped into Leon's room in a slightly crowded manner. Looking at a mushroom tree that was more than 4 meters high in front of him, and the guard who brought this thing to the room by himself, Leon's mouth twitched involuntarily. "Just put it there." Leon pointed to the floor in the middle of the room. And then, with a clang, the thick tree was pushed to the floor. "Thank you for your hard work. It is my honor to serve the Viscount," the guard said hurriedly. After the guard left, Leon squatted down and observed this special plant unique to Anatolia. Mushrooms are everywhere. But mushrooms that grow like trees are unique in Anatolia. There are large areas of moon mushroom forests on the land of Anatolia, from bottom to top, from large to small caps are stacked up layer by layer along the stipe. From a distance, the wide cap looks like a wrinkled petal, bending upward at the edge. On every full moon night, The unique barbed hook structure at the top of the tree will produce spores, twinkling with starlight, and seize the few arable lands in Anatolia. Leon's mind turned, and a strange-shaped machine clanged again and appeared on the floor of the room out of thin air. The bottom is a base made of 3 pine woods. In the middle, on the main body polished by bright white rocks, 2 light golden gears are connected by a chain, and a joystick that can be moved up and down is inserted diagonally on the side. This is the scientific instrument that originally existed in the ancient archives. On the way to Anatolia, although he did not actually operate it, Leon thought he had mastered the use of this thing. Compared with the scientific instruments marked on the nameplate, Leon would rather regard the machine in front of him as his novice gift package. He took out a shadow monster that was slacking off all day and not working hard from the space of the archives, and regardless of the fact that the guy was twisting his body back and forth in his hands, he turned around and stuffed it into the card slot of the scientific instrument. With a creaking sound, the gold-plated gears trembled, as if they had shaken off the dust that had been sealed for thousands of years, and began to turn slowly. Leon immediately took out a knife, cut the moon mushroom tree in front of him into scattered small pieces, and then threw them into the groove above the scientific instrument. Leon crossed his legs, supported his head with his arms, and stared at the rumbling machine in front of him, his eyes full of curiosity. According to the information in the archives, although the scientific instrument in front of him looks extremely simple in structure, its function is extremely powerful. In simple terms, it is roughly equivalent to a mechanical version of the encyclopedia, and it can even give a solution that conforms to the current version according to Leon's thoughts. Sure enough, after a short while, sheets of papyrus were pulled out from the opening at the bottom of the scientific instrument. Leon quickly took the papyrus and took a closer look, and his face was immediately filled with obvious joy. According to the version of the answer given by scientific instruments, these moon mushroom forests, which are widely distributed in Anatolia, have risen from ordinary plants to the category of strategic resources. At the beginning, the reason why Leon set his eyes on the moon mushroom tree in front of him was actually because the powder of the moon mushroom was the necessary raw material for performing the black soil generation technique. By grinding the cap of the moon mushroom into powder and supplementing it with other special raw materials, the originally barren land will become fertile and productive black soil. What Leon did not expect was that the other content printed on the papyrus opened the door to a new world for him. As we all know, the stem of a mushroom is composed of branched and slender hyphae. Even the moon mushrooms born under the influence of the black fog cannot escape this rule. But the difference is that the log-like sturdy stem of the moon mushroom tree makes its hyphae not only slender and elastic, but also shiny and elegant. The papyrus says, the priests of Aaron were fascinated by it, and the noble kings used it to decorate the palace. They are the golden fleece on the trees, the most beautiful fabric in the world. The ancients called it moonlight velvet. New author, please read it. Reading it again is really important. Chapter 5, Good. The technology tree is gradually going crooked. When people feel hungry, they are usually very hungry. So, after Leon stared at the papyrus in his hand for a long time, he finally made a decision, that is, to eat first. Even in remote Anatolia, the food of the nobles is much better than that of the poor civilians. Grilled beef ribs with freshly picked juicy berries and white bread made from fine wheat flour. Although it has been a long time, the cook of the castle still remembers Leon's eating habits clearly, and specially roasts the tender beef bones to be well done. The dwarf Sherman, who was sitting opposite Leon, seemed a little flattered. It is an honor for Sherman to dine with the Viscount. The dwarf lifted the hood on his head, revealing a shiny and smooth head. I always remember you, Sherman. My father once told me that you are the best craftsman in the territory. Leon cut a large piece of beef and put it into his mouth, not sparing his praise. Hearing this, Sherman couldn't help but look surprised, and then he seemed to open up a long-sealed chatterbox. Oh, thank God of Forge for your blessing. The Viscount is right. Sherman is the best craftsman. But poor Sherman has not made better equipment in these years. Sherman also wants to work for the Ximena family, but the God of Forge no longer gives Sherman new inspiration. Damn it. Sherman knows that the Viscount values Sherman, but Sherman. In this world, the dwarves who believe in the God of Forge have two well-known and significant characteristics. One is their proud forging skills, and the other is their endless chatterbox nature. Seeing Sherman's emotions repeatedly swinging between pride and panic and depression, and the topic gradually deviating, Leon had to interrupt the dwarf's soliloquy. I want to give you a task. Ah. Task. Sherman was stunned, and then a burst of ecstasy appeared on his face. In his memory, the last such formal task he received from the Ximena family was more than 20 years ago, when he was ordered to supervise the construction of the Thorn Territory castle in front of him. Sherman can definitely do it. No matter what it is. Sherman will not let the Viscount down. At this moment, the dwarf who had been silent for many years suddenly jumped up from his chair, his eyes showing a kind of determination that was completely inconsistent with his dancing appearance. Then, Sherman saw burly Viscount Guard, slightly shyly hugging a moon mushroom tree that had been abused, and slowly walked into the hall. The original complete cap had been cut off by most people, and there were many traces of being chopped with a dagger on the smooth stem. For a moment, the dwarf's face was full of confusion. Leon was too lazy to say more, and waved his hand and handed over a piece of craft paper that he had already copied. There was a picture of a novel machine on it, and the structure and use of this machine were introduced in words. Moonlight velvet. Yes, moonlight velvet. Leon nodded. When I was studying in Parma these years, I heard about this magical creation in the songs of the troubadours. It is said that it was once called the golden fleece growing on the tree. So, the dwarf looked at the moon mushroom tree next to him. Although I don't know whether the plant in the song is the plant in front of me, only if you make the machine in the picture can I verify my guess. You know, the reason why Anatolia has not built a large-scale project or built machines and weapons in these years is ultimately due to lack of money. Leon said meaningfully. Hearing this, Sherman seemed to become more and more excited. Yes, yes. As long as the Viscount has money, it means that Anatolia has money, and if Anatolia has money, it is equivalent to having money. In this way, wouldn't those fantastic ideas in his head be? Thoughts are closed. Don't worry, Viscount. Give me 3 days. The machine in this sketch will be easy for the strong Sherman. Leon never doubted the skills of the dwarves, let alone the loyalty of his retainers. Since Sherman said it would take 3 days, it would definitely not be 4 days. After handing over the sketch, Leon immediately called the old butler Aaron. After returning to the territory after several years, although Leon could not say that he knew everything about the affairs in the territory, he was generally unfamiliar with it. Aaron was obviously prepared for this. When he heard that the young Viscount wanted to learn about the current situation of the territory from him, he cooperated very actively. There is only one city in the entire Anatolia region, the Thorn Territory, where almost all the people under the Viscount's rule live. Even if the guards, servants and retainers who are loyal to the Viscount are included, the total population is probably only more than 3,000 people. Leon nodded repeatedly as he listened. The Viscount's territory of Anatolia is located in the southeastern border of the kingdom, and it borders the land abandoned by the gods. To have such a number is already quite good. Aaron was afraid that his Lord Viscount was used to large cities with hundreds of thousands of people gathered, and would look down on the Viscount's territory with only more than 3,000 people. Seeing the Viscount nod, he was relieved in his heart. How many peasant women are good at weaving in the territory now? Huh? Even if Aaron was familiar with the territory, he was a little speechless for a moment. Not to mention in the chaotic Anatolia, even in the inland of the Andal Kingdom, there has never been a similar statistics. But Leon's focus at this time was obviously not on population statistics, so he said simply, call 20 subjects who are good at weaving. If there are not enough people, let the Viscount guards take over. As you wish. Although he had his doubts, Aaron agreed immediately. It's not easy to find a three-legged toad, but there are plenty of women who can weave. In other words, even if a lucky peasant woman is randomly drawn from the territory, she must be one who can weave. Although Sherman's loom will not be put into use for another 3 days, it is only the final process. Before the formal weaving, it has to go through the steps of reeling and refining, just like weaving silk in ancient times. But the difference is that the raw materials of the Antorians are no longer those cute young silkworms, but the moon mushroom forest distributed throughout the Antoria area. This also gave Leon a weird feeling. It seems that the technology tree of this world has been a little crooked since this moment. Chapter 6. If you wake up in the middle of the night, don't forget to lift the quilt for your roommate. The morning mist had just dissipated, and the face that was blown by the cold wind became more and more dry. Leon galloped along the north bank of the White Blade River. On the second day after returning to Anatolia, Leon finally walked out of the Thorn Territory castle accompanied by the Viscount's guards, passed through the crowded city, and was able to gaze into the distance outside the city wall. Because there is only a continuous mountain range between the abandoned land of the gods, there is often a thin black fog that crosses the barrier of the mountains and shrouds the sky of Anatolia. Especially in the evening and early morning when the light is not strong, the whole Anatolia seems a little foggy. Perhaps it is precisely because of this that many creatures that are very different from those in the kingdom have appeared on this land. The moon mushroom forest is just one of them. In addition, there are Gloom floating in the black pine forest, the man-eating plant growing on the foothills, and even the plateau hounds that invade the territory in groups from the southwest highlands. So, as the new Viscount of Anatolia, Leon intends to find out the surrounding situation before the cold winter comes. Even though he had learned a general idea from the old butler Aaron and many guards, he still had to see his own territory with his own eyes before he could feel at ease. The border of the Viscount of Anatolia was actually very vague, because except for the Thorn territory located in the center of Anatolia, the east, west and south directions were actually in a state of urgent development. There were large tracts of moon mushroom forests on both sides of the north and south. To the east was a wild land called Black Pine Woodland by the Antilians. There were continuous mountains in the south, and plateaus and hills in the southwest. Most of the arable land, except for the plain farmland around the Thorn territory, was occupied by trees. The idea of logging and land reclamation suddenly appeared in Leon's mind. At present, Anatolia was extremely poor, and the predicament of land desertification was far away. As long as the trees on the foothills were not cut down and secondary disasters such as mudslides and mountain torrents were avoided, large-scale land reclamation could be said to be promising. After all, the population is too small. Leon couldn't help but sigh. Although the territory is currently short of food, as long as we survive this cold winter, when the spring comes next year, the black soil generation technique will turn the barren land into fertile soil. As long as there is no external threat, food self-sufficiency is not a problem, so the most worrying thing is that the territory cannot provide enough manpower. Does the Viscount need manpower? Todd, the captain of the guard, took over the conversation. Not now, but after the spring of next year, the more manpower the better. That's easy, don't worry, Viscount. As long as we get through this cold winter, I will take people to the mountains to capture people. Even if I have to kidnap them, I will kidnap the people the Viscount needs. Todd promised confidently. Go up the mountain to capture people. Todd's words made Leon suddenly realize a resource that he had previously ignored. It's not just his own people who live in Anatolia. The chaotic Anatolia lacks everything, but the only thing that is not lacking is robbers and savages. However, compared to going up the mountain to catch people, Leon already had a better idea in his mind. So, he cast his eyes on the people who were cutting down the moon mushroom forest not far away. To be honest, the efficiency of the old butler Aaron is indeed commendable. Although Sherman's weaving machine has not yet been put in place, and the moonlight velvet mentioned by Leon is unheard of, out of trust in their Viscount, the first batch of people have already started a vigorous logging campaign around the moon mushroom forest. Todd, you said, every year of the jackdaw? Why do the Highland hounds only stare at the Thorn territory and go crazy? Leon suddenly asked. Hearing this, Todd immediately replied, it's not necessary to keep an eye on the Thorn territory. The main reason is that the Thorn territory is located on the route that the plateau hounds must pass through. In addition, the hungry hounds have a keen sense of smell. The Thorn territory castle, which has a large population, naturally becomes the target of these beasts. You said, if we cut a road to the north from the moon mushroom forest in the north, can we relieve some of the pressure on the territory? Leon asked calmly. You mean? Todd couldn't help but widen his eyes. The nobles in the north of Anatolia have never been good birds. Every winter, the price of grain shipped from the inland can even triple. They make a lot of money, and every time they don't let us bleed back, the Anatolian people will take revenge. Since those nobles who took advantage of our misfortune have made our wallets deflated, then they can't think of having an easy time this winter. I just don't know if my idea is feasible. After saying that, Leon looked at Todd, who was shocked. Rather than suffering by yourself, it is better to drag everyone into the water. Just like being woken up by the cold in the middle of the night, you must not forget to lift the quilt for your roommate no matter what. It seems. You can try it. Highland hounds are particularly sensitive to the smell of blood. As long as they are guided and arranged, this will work. For a moment, Todd seemed to realize something extraordinary, and looked at Leon with admiration in his eyes. Living in such a difficult environment, the people of Anatolia have never been kind. If Aaron were here, he might hesitate about the impact on all parties, but Todd would only applaud. However, even for Aaron, Leon has enough reasons to convince him. As a vassal of the Duke of Galicia, the only thing Leon needs to maintain most is the relationship with his lord, the Bravas family of the Duke of Galicia. As for the rest of the nobles. Anyway, Leon knows very well that the nobles in the north of Anatolia have always been distant from the Duke, and the Bravas family has long wanted to weaken the strength of these traitors. Although it is not very moral to guide the Plateau Hounds to invade the north, it is a foregone conclusion that the benefits outweigh the risks for Anatolia. If there is no chaos, create chaos. If there is no population, create refugees. It is unknown how many soldiers can be gathered in the southeast of the kingdom, which has been peaceful for a long time. Maybe in the end, it will have to rely on the mercenaries in its hands to solve the problem. In this way, not only will Anatolia have a population, but it will also have the opportunity to extort money and solve the employment problem of the mercenaries. It is really a win-win situation. In this case, then this matter will be left to you, but you also remember to communicate with Butler Aaron and try not to make any mistakes. Yes. Todd rubbed his hands expectantly. As he spoke, a guard rode a tall horse and galloped from the direction of Thorn territory. My Lord Viscount. Sherman said that he has made what you want. Chapter 7 Moonlight Velvet and Escudo. Mrs. Mitchell raised 3 children alone. Her husband, a mercenary born in Anatolia, a strong man who had the hope of becoming the Viscount's guard, died on the battlefield of the Andal Kingdom's second reconquest. From then on, her life changed dramatically. Although the mercenaries' reward was extremely generous, life at home suddenly became extremely difficult after the man's death. Fortunately, Mrs. Mitchell, who raised 3 children, was a woman who was good at giving birth. According to the rules set by the old Viscount, women who raised more than 3 children could get relief. This allowed Mrs. Mitchell to breathe a sigh of relief, and she could always make a living by doing needlework and picking wild fruits from the forest outside the city. However, perhaps it was after the death of the old Viscount, or perhaps after the arrival of the new lord, Mrs. Mitchell's life gradually changed. 40 Andal silver coins per month, this was the remuneration given to Mrs. Mitchell by the old butler Aaron. Mrs. Mitchell didn't know what a textile worker was, but she knew what Andal silver coins were. A full 40 Andal silver coins, this is already a high income for the civilians in Anatolia. Mrs. Mitchell, who lived in poverty, naturally accepted this condition happily and became one of the first textile workers in Anatolia. In the next few days, she saw a scene that made her doubt the world. She thought she was here to weave cloth, but she didn't expect to soak trees first. Under the command of a young man, the female workers immersed the moon mushrooms, which had been cut to only the stems, into the steaming boiling water. Only one day later, these moon mushrooms, which were neither edible nor valuable in the eyes of the Anatolians, were soaked in hot water and turned into countless crystal and slender silk threads. Silk threads. Mrs. Mitchell could swear that she had never seen such thin and light silk threads. They were so thin and light that she had to rub many silk threads together to see them carefully. The dwarf Sherman used his superb skills to build machines for the female workers that they had never seen before. With a rotation of the wooden roller and a series of other ingenious and dazzling structures, countless light silk threads gradually merged into thin and long threads. Under the moonlight, these silk threads even emit a faint and soft light. It was not until this moment that Mrs. Mitchell heard from the chat of others the identity of the young man who directed them to weave. Viscount Anatolia, León Ximena. Yes. Only a learned and knowledgeable noble lord can think of such a wonderful way and explore such a magical use for those moon mushrooms that have been abandoned. You have made an invaluable contribution. If it weren't for your machine, there would be no silk in front of us. Leon looked at the first piece of woven moonlight velvet silk in front of him and praised it sincerely. Sherman is very happy to be able to work for the Viscount. But this is all the credit of the Viscount. Sherman's drawings all come from the Viscount. The dwarf touched his tall nose, looking a little shy. If the Viscount has anything else to make, you can give it to Sherman. Every dwarf is a natural craftsman. Leon smiled and nodded. Don't worry. Your current task is to build more looms. The more of these things, the more abundant the territory's finances will be. When there's money, the craftsmen in the territory will probably be too busy to eat. The news that the first moonlight quilt was woven was soon heard by Aaron. When the elderly butler hurried over from outside the city, A piece of silky and soft silk had been placed on the long oak table in the castle hall. And Leon had been waiting for his arrival. "Is this moonlight velvet?" Butler Aaron couldn't help but gasp. "That's right." Leon did not hide the excitement on his face. Aaron reached out his hand and gently stroked the delicate silk in front of him, which seemed a little unreal. His fingertips slid across the surface of the silk, which was a kind of silkiness and softness he had never felt before. Any other fabric pales in comparison. In this era, even the nobles who ruled a region usually wore clothes made of fine linen or precious fur. How could they have seen such delicate and gorgeous fabrics? If there's enough time in the future, the female workers can even use needles and threads to sew patterns of different colors, and sew the family emblems of the nobles and the legends of the wandering poets on them. Leon added. "Great." Aaron couldn't help clapping his hands and said, "From now on, the specialty of Anatolia is no longer just the fierce mercenaries, but also the gorgeous moonlight velvet fabric in front of us." For a moment, he seemed to see countless golden escudos waving at him. But Aaron changed the subject. "Now it's less than half a month before the cold winter comes. How many rolls of silk can the territory produce? Has the Viscount ever thought about the sales of these fabrics?" Aaron's worries are not unreasonable. Now it's winter, and although the severe cold has not yet arrived, according to past experience, Leon has less than a month left. If the time for traveling back and forth is deducted, there is only half a month left. I have ordered Sherman to build a loom with all his strength. In half a month, he can probably produce more than 100 rolls of silk made of moonlight velvet. As for sales, if Uncle Aaron takes action, it will not be a problem," Leon said with a smile. Hearing this, Aaron said in a deep voice, "This thing is extremely important to the territory. Since the Viscount has ordered it, I dare not refuse. If it can be transported to the royal city, the price will definitely be the highest, but now the cold winter is coming, and we have to use the gold coins we earned to buy food on the way back. Time is tight, and I am afraid that the farthest we can go is Parma City. It doesn't matter. Moonlight velvet is not a one-time deal. If we can open up sales in Parma City, it will be good. If there's a chance, we can try to sign a long-term supply agreement with the Bravis family first." Long-term supply agreement. It means that the Bravis family pays a deposit, and then we deliver the goods regularly. If the price is right, we can even give up part of the profit. Why? Butler Aaron couldn't help but frown, looking puzzled. After all, the Viscount of Anatolia is nominally loyal to the Duke of Galicia. Since he plans to drag several similar nobles in the north into the water when facing the Plateau Hounds, he must always have a good relationship with his own lord, right? Leon explained with a smile. Aaron was smart and capable, and good at management, but the straightforward character of the Anatolians was ingrained in him. If Leon hadn't specifically reminded him, he would never have thought of using the profits from the moonlight velvet to win over his own lord. This also made Leon feel more and more that there was a lack of talent in the territory. Remote Anatolia has never lacked strong warriors, but what it lacks most is always loyal and astute managers and businessmen. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, Elk Goose and Ancient Magic. Swoosh, the sharp arrow flew through the air, like the sickle of the god of death, nailing firmly on the black pine tree not far away. Good archery. Todd clapped his hands excitedly, and couldn't help but praise loudly. But then he seemed to realize that something was wrong, and turned around embarrassedly. The dark-faced Viscount instantly came into his sight, and his colleagues around him also looked at him like a stupid roe deer. Good archery. Leon took out an arrow from the quiver and asked calmly. You know, he came out to hunt, not to shoot. The target Leon just aimed at was not the pine tree that had stood there for decades, but the elk goose that had just been scared away dozens of meters away. Not good. Todd hurriedly made up. Leon shook his head helplessly. If you really can't speak, then don't say anything. He bent his bow and arrow, and aimed at the fat body fleeing not far away for a long time. He finally put down the bow and arrow in his hand. Archery is really not suitable for me. Turning his horse's head, Leon still gave up the idea of hunting in person. I want 2 sets of elk and goose antlers. As the Lord of Thorn territory and the entire Anatolia, Leon has long been conscious of being a noble. Although weaving moonlight velvet can bring a lot of wealth to the territory, it can't be rushed. So, taking advantage of the leisure time before the cold winter comes, León naturally cast his eyes on his golden finger. León has never stopped exploring his golden finger. For him, it is not only a treasure trove for him to obtain knowledge, but also a basis for him to govern the territory. The scientific instruments taken out from the ancient archives showed León the value of this treasure trove in just a few days. No matter how hard León racked his brains, he couldn't figure out why that strange machine that looked ordinary and was almost entirely made of wood, stone and gold-plated gears could play a magical role like an encyclopedia. He didn't understand, so he chose to read. The books in the ancient archives were numerous and messy, and the sound of the shadow monsters gnawing on the black fog was also annoying. Fortunately, the objects and books in the archives could almost be taken back to the real world like scientific instruments, allowing León to read quietly by the fireplace in the room. Because of the scientific instruments, the floor where León's room was located had become a forbidden area in the castle under the order of the young Viscount. Except for the personal waiter and the core personnel of the territory such as Aaron and Todd, no one was allowed to set foot. Many people had seen the scientific instruments placed in León's room with their own eyes, but no one had ever questioned it. Although in León's self-perception, he was just a fledgling mage apprentice. But in the eyes of the people of Anatolia, their master was a mage. He is a wizard who has studied in Parma for many years and has the experience of studying abroad. It is normal to make some machines and tools commonly used by wizards, right? It is also normal to have a storage ring in hand, right? All unusual things seem so reasonable under León's identity as a wizard. Even León does not need to explain the scientific instruments that appear out of thin air, and everyone has naturally completed the closed loop of thought. The reason why León went outside the city to hunt elk and geese was not a whim or a sudden idea, but an idea that came to him after he stuffed the antlers hanging on the wall of the room into the scientific machine. After stuffing the moon mushroom into the scientific machine, León got a papyrus that recorded the method of weaving moonlight velvet. So, the young Viscount showed his unparalleled ability to demolish the house in front of everyone. Since even the ordinary moon mushroom can become the future cash cow of Anatolia, what about other things? Adhering to the concept of practice to gain true knowledge, the bearskin carpet in the room and the antlers hanging on the wall have become the raw materials sent to the scientific instruments by him. Even the wooden bed where León slept had a corner cut off from the edge. It was during this process that the antlers of the elk goose successfully entered León's field of vision. In the black pine forest on the east side of the Thorn territory, there lie various creatures that have changed under the influence of the black fog, and the elk goose is one of them. They have huge antlers like elks and fat bodies like dodos. They can't fly, but the antlers on their heads are their sharpest weapons against natural enemies. Coupled with a visibility of less than 10 meters, this special creature has become the most well-known forest destroyer in the black pine forest. But what León cares about is not the fat goose legs under them, but the antlers on their heads. That is an excellent material for making a staff. As a real mage apprentice, León already has his own staff, a staff inlaid with sapphires and oak. But in the process of flipping through the books in the archives these days, León came into contact with a wider world ancient magic. Ladle raised the staff in his hand, and in an instant, ice and snow covered the world, the whistling cold wind pierced the thin armor of the soldiers, and the burning flames exuded the chill of ice and snow. This is the description of the priest in the history book of the archives. Priest is the name of the wizard by the ancestors. This is the conclusion León came to after reading dozens of books about magic. Even though the regime established by the ancestors thousands of years ago has long been destroyed, no one can deny that the priests, or wizards, of that era have far more powerful power than today. The ancestors can walk in the sky with powerful magic, and even use the power of wizards to tear a terrible crack in the earth. This made León, who is accustomed to the low magic world in front of him, feel a little unreal. Then, a strong curiosity about ancient magic emerged in his heart. No one can suppress the pursuit of power in his heart, especially León as a time traveler. According to the records in the books, a variety of ancient magic runes and the staffs of the ancestors made of different materials together constructed the heyday of the priests thousands of years ago. What are the differences between the staffs of the ancestors? Does the power of the priests come from those powerful staffs, or from the ancient magic runes in the books? Countless questions linger in León's mind. León doesn't know the answers to these questions, so he chooses the method of elimination. The complexity of the ancient magic runes is not something Leon can sort out in a day or two. And since there are traces of elk and geese around the territory, he will kill the geese and take their horns, and then use the method of making a staff in the archives to make a new staff of his own. Only in this way, perhaps he can gradually approach the answer that seems to be the most correct. Oh, please read on. Chapter 9. Winter is coming. Something new happened in Anatolia recently, which caused a great uproar in this small city. It is said that the new Viscount, who may have been stupid when learning magic in Parma, actually summoned a group of peasant women in the territory to weave trees. Not to mention Anatolia, even in the entire Andal kingdom and even the entire continent, this behavior is quite explosive. At first, people still didn't believe such outrageous rumors. But after just a few days, a textile workshop was built near the Lord's castle, and people even used carriages to transport the freshly cut moon mushroom trees in bundles. Now, the original outrageous rumors were instantly confirmed. The winter in this world is boring and dull. Farming is impossible, hunting is difficult, and if you stay at home, you will feel hungry from time to time. The rumors of hunting instantly aroused the gossip of the people in the territory. So much so that every day, a large group of people in the territory surrounded the textile workshop and looked inside curiously. Whenever the weaving women workers finished their work, the entrance to the workshop was even more lively. Many people in the territory looked at the workers coming in and out with pity. It's too miserable. It's really too miserable. Food is already in short supply in winter, and now we have to spend energy and time to accompany the Lord to go crazy and weave trees for the Lord. It's really miserable. The grand scene of onlookers lasted for 3 days. Until Mrs. Mitchell, who is unfortunate enough to become a weaving woman, under the eyes of everyone, took out an Andal silver coin in the bakery in the north of the city and bought a piece of white bread that the common people dared not even think about. Most of the neighbors knew about Mrs. Mitchell's situation. It is common for one person to take care of 3 children and not have a meal. How can she afford such expensive food? Now, the answer is very clear. Don't worry about whether the moon mushroom tree can be woven or not. Just talking about the money, the people in the territory are willing to accompany the noble lord to go crazy. It just so happened that the new loom was put into operation, and the workshop was short of staff. Aaron simply posted a notice outside the castle under the order of his master. Requirements: good at weaving. Remuneration: 40 Andal silver coins per month. Wow! The originally quiet town exploded instantly. A piece of news titled, "The Noble Master Who is a Wizard Can Do Everything and Can Turn Trees into Gorgeous Fabrics," instantly topped the town's hot search. It was still the front page headline. Not to mention anything else, this can be regarded as the first high-paying profession in Anatolia besides being a mercenary. This alone is enough to make the people talk about it. And Leon actually didn't have any idea of keeping the news of Moonlight Velvet secret. Once Aaron went out to sell it, not to mention Anatolia, the entire Andal kingdom would know that Anatolia had a new specialty called Moonlight Velvet. But what can you do if you know it? The moon mushroom forest is only found in Anatolia. Is there anyone willing to challenge the Anatolian mercenaries who are known for their bravery? Just like that, half a month passed in a flash amidst the hustle and bustle of Thorn territory. Standing in front of the city gate, the convoy loaded with Moonlight Velvet was ready. During this time, thin and light silk threads were transformed into gorgeous silks by the operation of machines and the hard work of female workers. They are light and soft, exquisite and noble. Just a glance at them seems to show traces of money. Don't worry, Lord Viscount, there will be no mistakes this time. What you have asked will be done. Aaron promised solemnly. Leon patted the old butler on the shoulder, without saying much, but calmly reminded, "Be careful." The convoy went farther and farther in the cold wind and gradually disappeared from Leon's sight. Looking back, Mrs. Mitchell was standing behind Leon nervously. "You have done a good job these days." Leon affirmed Mrs. Mitchell's hard work in these days, encouraged and praised all the female textile workers, and gave important suggestions for the development of the textile workshop. This is nothing. The master gave me so much money, so I have to work hard." Mrs. Mitchell seemed a little nervous. Leon smiled and said, "Since you have done a good job during this period, I believe you don't mind continuing to work. The textile workshop will be handed over to you to manage in the future." I. Mrs. Mitchell was shocked. She never thought that she would be entrusted with an important task by the young Viscount. "I believe you can manage it well." Leon certainly would not make random appointments. As early as a few days ago, he asked Aaron to conduct a very simple background check on everyone in the textile workshop. And Mrs. Mitchell just met all the requirements perfectly. A native of Anatolia, simple and clear interpersonal relationships, hard-working and willing to work attitude, she was concerned about raising multiple children, and her husband even died on the battlefield for Anatolia. No matter from which angle, Mrs. Mitchell is obviously the best choice. I am willing to serve you, my lord. After a brief trance, Mrs. Mitchell responded quickly. The first heavy snow since the beginning of winter in Anatolia finally arrived as promised the day after Aaron left. As soon as he opened the window, goose feather-like snowflakes hit Leon's cheeks in the cold wind. Looking around, the whole city was covered with snow, and the outside of the city had already become a white world. But when he walked back to the room with a brisk pace, seeing the floor that had been messed up by himself, Leon's mood suddenly became jade. The main feature of the manufacture of the ancient staff is that the knowledge in the book is inconsistent with the actual operation. Although it seems from the book that it is easy to make a staff with the antlers of the elkos, when the Viscount's guards really delivered the antlers of the elkos, Leon felt that he had no idea where to start. It's not that Sherman can't help. It's mainly because according to the archives, the staff made by hand will resonate with oneself and produce a strange connection. So, as a noble lord, Leon finally chose to do it himself. It took Leon 2 full days to trim and polish the antlers of the elkos. Although it still doesn't look very good, it at least no longer affects the use. The structure of the staff can be roughly divided into 2 parts, the body and the handle. In Leon's plan, he will use the antlers of the elk goose as the material for the body of the staff to ensure that the energy of magic can be transmitted stably. As for the handle, the black pine wood from the suburbs of the Thorn territory is selected, which is comfortable to hold. With the arrival of winter, Leon's staff production process has finally come to the last step. The staff of the ancestors is not formed in one piece. There is a small opening at the top of the handle, and the body of the staff polished by the elk goose antlers must be inserted into the opening. According to the practice of the ancestors, before the body of the staff is inserted, a special material that can interact with magic needs to be placed at the bottom of the handle opening. As for what to put, to be honest, Leon was at a loss. There were a few examples in the archives, such as dragon blood, phoenix tail feathers, and moon elf tears. But none of them were available to Leon now. However, when Leon cast his eyes on the scientific instruments on the side, a slightly strange idea gradually emerged in Leon's mind. Chapter 10 Behind every successful man, there is a silently dedicated golden finger. The staff production manual came from the ancient archives, and the scientific instruments also came from the ancient archives. In summary, both are the crystallization of the ancient civilization. Leon has always been curious about the principle of scientific instruments. Curious about why this machine, which is only composed of a few broken wooden boards and a few broken stones, can run on its own after inserting the shadow monster. And now, the previous thinking has brought Leon a new idea. Of course, he can't get magic materials such as dragon blood and phoenix tail feathers. Not to mention that he is a small viscount, even if he is the king of the Andal Kingdom, he may not be able to get them. And since the shadow monsters he collected before can drive scientific instruments, can they also be used as a unique magic material to make a small contribution to the completion of his staff? Thinking of this, Leon's mind immediately changed, and a shadow monster that had eaten fat in the ancient archives was instantly pinched in his hand. Perhaps because he had stayed in the ancient archives for too long, the shadow monster had changed its previous appearance of baring its teeth and claws when it was captured, and the black mist that it had just swallowed was still overflowing from the corners of its mouth. Another one is missing. Leon couldn't help shaking his head and muttered with some pain. The more shadow monsters there are in the archives, the faster the black mist will dissipate, and Leon will be able to access the books and machines stored deep in the archives more quickly. However, whether it is the driving of scientific instruments or the current attempts, they all need to consume the limited number of shadow monsters. Fortunately, Leon had accumulated enough shadow monsters when he was studying in Parma, otherwise he really couldn't withstand such consumption. He quickly stuffed the shadow monster in his hand into the handle, and then inserted the antler staff that he polished by himself into the handle. Almost in a flash, the staff in Leon's hand suddenly trembled violently and made a buzzing sound. As a warm and hazy luster flashed across the surface of the staff, Leon seemed to feel that he was still connected to the staff in his hand. It really works. Seeing this, Leon was immediately delighted. This was an extremely magical feeling, a feeling he had never experienced before when waving the staff. Leon raised the staff involuntarily and waved it gently towards the fireplace in the room. Fireball. This is the first basic spell that any mage apprentice comes into contact with, and Leon naturally memorized it. But this time, as Leon chanted softly, a huge fireball with a diameter of nearly 30 centimeters suddenly appeared on the top of the staff, and then quickly rushed towards the fireplace. It's over. Wrong decision. Leon shouted wildly in his heart. In an instant, the flames in the fireplace suddenly expanded several times, and with a roar, Leon was blown to the other end of the room in a mess. When the guards rushed into the room, they saw the Viscount with a face full of ashes and half a charred bearskin carpet. The window of the room had been opened by Leon, and the cold wind that poured into the room in winter was trying to dispel the smoke in the room. Ahem. Leon couldn't help coughing. Viscount, are you okay? The guards asked in awe. My master is indeed a wizard. If it were an ordinary person, who would set his room on fire? Clean it up. Leon said in a slightly embarrassed tone, and then he slipped out quite smoothly. If not, he felt that he might laugh on the spot. The staff of the ancestors was really amazing. A small wizard apprentice like him could actually release a fireball with a diameter of nearly 30 centimeters. You know, before he returned to Anatolia, the power of his fireball spell was only 1/5 of what it is now, at most making the flames in the fireplace burn a little more vigorously. Period. If not, he would not have used the fireball technique in his room so desperately. Behind every successful man, there is a silently dedicated golden finger. The words of the ancient Greek sage Aristotle are true. Leon couldn't help but admire sincerely. The guards and waiters were busy cleaning the room, so Leon simply took the opportunity to wander around the city leisurely. The first snowfall of winter has not yet ended, but the snowflakes falling from the sky have become increasingly sparse. The midday sun shines down, reflecting on the white and pure snow, flashing a dazzling luster. Leon, wrapped in a thick bearskin coat, walked through the rugged streets accompanied by 2 guards. Because the snowfall has not stopped, there are almost no people on the street, and most of the pedestrians who occasionally appear on the street corners just pass by in a hurry. There is no way the people living in the city don't have thick and warm clothes like Leon. Now that the cold winter is coming, sitting around the fire at home to keep warm is the norm. Wait, warming up by the fire? For a moment, Leon couldn't help but cast his eyes on the rows of wooden houses in front of him. The densely packed houses were next to each other, and bundles of firewood and hay were piled up in the corners of the streets. The previous fireball technique made Leon particularly sensitive to thoughts related to fire. Looking at the city in front of him again, Leon's face instantly became a little ugly. If an accident happened when someone was heating, Leon had no doubt that the blazing sea of fire would extend to the entire street, and even the entire city. What if a fire breaks out? Leon suddenly asked the guard beside him. It depends on whether it was intentional or unintentional. If it was intentional, he would definitely be beaten to death. If it was unintentional, it would only take 3 to 5 days to rebuild it. The answer given by the guard was quite straightforward, but it was also true. The civilians of this era had no wealth. Their greatest wealth was themselves. But even so, the price of selling it is at most 3 or 5 escudos, and his descendants will be serfs for generations. This won't work. Leon couldn't help but frown. This is not entirely for the people, but more for himself. Fire will kill people, and the people will decrease. Only when the population is large can you be called a lord, otherwise you can only be regarded as a commander without troops. What's more, his lord's castle is almost surrounded by civilian areas, and there will definitely be more money bags like textile workshops in the future. If it is burned down by a raging fire one day, it will be too late to regret. Return to the castle, and let Todd come to see me immediately. Leon said in a deep voice. He felt it was very necessary to add a kind of insurance for his own safety. For example, setting up an Anatolian fire volunteer team might be a good idea. Chapter 11 Volunteers? Militia. Whenever winter comes, the people of Anatolia will become extremely busy. No one knows when the hounds from the southwest highlands will quietly attack. The only thing the people can do is to collect more firewood and pick more wild fruits in the few remaining days. This has almost become a habit formed by the people living in this land for many years. And at this time, the mercenaries and guards in the territory will also be busy. From time to time, scouts and cavalry will gallop away from the city gate, always paying attention to the traces of the plateau hounds. Although theoretically, after the first snowfall in Anatolia, it is usually half a month before the invasion of the plateau hounds. But no one dares to be careless. After all, it is not unheard of for the hounds to migrate early. In this land, every habit, every tradition, and even some insignificant details of the people almost all come from the lessons formed in Blood and Death. Even though the mercenaries had already built a high platform near the southwest highlands and prepared beacons with reeds, dry firewood, and cow and sheep dung, no one dared to relax their vigilance. Because those ferocious creatures, although called hounds, are more like some kind of mutated monsters in people's memory. They have long, stiff black manes like wild boars, and sharp and pointed canine teeth that are tens of centimeters long. They are bloodthirsty and cruel. Although their limbs are slightly short, they are like a ghostly black shadow when running. Not only do they rush around, but their speed is comparable to that of war horses. They are beasts that everyone in Anatolia fears. Fortunately, these beasts will only raid the territory every 5 years, otherwise, desolation will replace chaos and hardship and become the new label of Anatolia. It was precisely when people were nervously preparing winter supplies that a new announcement appeared in the vision of the people after recruiting textile workers. This is a notice drafted by León Ximena, the Viscount of Anatolia. Although the subjects could not read or write, León arranged for his personal attendants to read it in shifts. In short, the content can be roughly summarized into the following 3 points: food, money, strong men. As for the so-called Anatolia Fire Volunteer Team, the subjects did not understand, nor did they care. They only cared about one thing: food. When the cold winter came, every grain of food was extremely precious, and it was common to fill their stomachs with hay and tree bark. Just the fact that they could eat was enough to make the subjects eager to try. You know, even for such an outrageous thing as weaving trees, the female workers could receive 40 andal silver coins every month. And this volunteer team, the name obviously sounds longer, and it only requires strong men, so the treatment must be good. So, in just 3 days, 100 subjects who had been screened through layers of screening became the first batch of members of the Anatolia Fire Volunteer Team. My Lord Viscount. Standing beside León, Todd's face was full of earnestness. Looking at the 100 people, he seemed to see more than 100 mouths to eat. I know what you want to say. León interrupted Todd calmly. You want to say that the food in the territory is not enough to survive the winter, and it is a bit inappropriate to take on so much now. That's not what I mean, Todd said hurriedly. Then he held it in his mouth for a long time, and seeing that he couldn't think of anything else because of the lack of vocabulary in his head, he added in a low voice with some resentment, but it's almost like this. Don't worry, there will be enough food. León waved his hand, signaling Todd to calm down. Of course, he knew that it was inevitable that the establishment of the Anatolia Fire Volunteer Team at this time was a bit hasty. But León knew that if he didn't do this, once the hounds climbed over the city wall like in the past, the people under his command would suffer heavy casualties. This was not León's guess, but something that would inevitably happen every year of the jackdaw. The mercenaries of Anatolia are indeed very brave, but due to the shortage of manpower, there will always be places that cannot be taken care of. Therefore, although the idea of forming this team was originally just to prevent fires, but now, at least in León's mind, these people are the future reserve militia. Todd and others are indeed very loyal and brave, but León also wants to start a new team of his own from scratch. After all, mercenaries are the specialty of Anatolia, and León does not intend to keep those fierce men by his side forever to protect his own safety. And his previous desire to divert the trouble to the nobles in the south was also based on this consideration. Only disputes and threats can make Anatolia's battle-hardened mercenaries useful. Looking at the young men lining up in the open space in the city, León's heart was full of relief. At the same time, Juan, who was standing in the queue, was also stealing a glance at his lord from the corner of his eye. Among a group of rough-looking men, the slightly thin Juan looks particularly conspicuous. It can even be said that he is the shortest and weakest one in the team. Until this moment, Juan also clearly remembered that when he signed up, the conscription officer of the territory doubted him. The Lord has set the rules that no one under the age of 14 is allowed to sign up. The simple and straightforward words left a deep impression on Juan, and this became one of the reasons why he was extremely hard-working in daily training. Although the content of the training made Juan, or most people, feel a little puzzled. Their daily task was to stand there motionless and do some simple cues. The young lord called it military posture. The people of the territory did not understand what military posture was, but as long as the lord provided food and money, they were happy to accompany him. The process was a bit boring, and their legs and feet were a little sore, but the Antilleans were least afraid of hardship. No matter how hard it was much better than dying. So much so that León often marveled at the perseverance and persistence of the people in the territory, and from the third day on, he personally went out to train with the people in his spare time. As for fire prevention and firefighting, they became a bonus. Only when the volunteers finished training or took a break, would the old people in the territory with experience in firefighting explain it. Eating, sleeping and participating in training, this is all the volunteers do in a day. As time went by, even though they only conducted simple training such as military posture and marching, the Antillia Fire Volunteer Team also revealed an inexplicable and strange feeling. And this feeling, in Todd's eyes, was particularly obvious. Chapter 12 When the Smoke of War Rises. At first, Todd was somewhat dissatisfied with his master's approach. Although the leader used the banner of the Antillian Fire Volunteer Team when recruiting, as an old mercenary who had fought on the battlefield for many years, Todd could actually clearly guess León's intentions during daily training. Fire prevention is at most incidental. What his master really wants to do is to personally train a team loyal to him. When he realized this, Todd was actually quite pleased. As León's father, the late Viscount Arthur's right-hand man, Todd witnessed León's growth with his own eyes. When he saw that the young new Viscount had his own ideas, he was naturally very pleased. You know, for many years, Todd has almost never missed any war in the Andal Kingdom. From the Reconquista 20 years ago to the suppression of the peasant uprising 16 years ago, from the Andal Kingdom's War of Succession to the throne 11 years ago to the border conflict 7 years ago. He even killed a Marquess of the Kingdom of Walrus during that Reconquista. Todd had seen countless soldiers. In his memory, there were spirited cavalrymen and demoralized militiamen. He had seen guards with top-grade weapons but were beaten and fled by bandits, and he had also seen mountain people fighting knights without weapons. Todd was knowledgeable and deeply touched by war. But the only thing he had not seen was the training method of his lord. During this period of time, his lord had been very careful and had given him a big eye. When he saw León asking the people to stand in a row and stand still, Todd really wanted to shout out loud, "Soldiers are not trained like this." But Todd held back. Because he gradually saw a little different taste in this boring and strange training. After dozens of days of training, it was difficult for Todd to judge their actual combat capabilities. But whether it was obedience or discipline, the people in front of him had greatly improved. Even more directly, although they certainly cannot compete with the experienced mercenaries in a war, they have gradually formed the prototype of an elite division. This is not because the people in the territory are so talented, but because the judgment of elite in this era has been so low that it is outrageous. The army marches while the soldiers flee, which is incomprehensible to León, but it is a normal phenomenon in this era. Compared with those militias who march like villages and towns, and compared with those cavalrymen who carry colorful flags like they are having a picnic, the Antillia Fire Volunteer Team is at least disciplined. And this is exactly what León values most. Under the simplest and plain temptation of providing meals, any order of León can be executed most effectively. At the beginning, those people in the territory who couldn't even tell the front, back, left and right have also made great progress during this period. So much so that in Todd's eyes, the evaluation of the Antillian Fire Volunteers has risen from the initial "I can beat a group of them alone" to a team of mercenaries can beat a group of them. Discipline. Obedience. When Todd finally figured out the intention behind these training programs, he even wanted to pull his mercenaries over to practice together. However, the plateau hounds from the southwest highlands did not give him such an opportunity. When a column of gray-black smoke rose into the sky in the southwest direction of the Thorn territory, everyone's heart was shrouded in an indelible cloud of sorrow. It's finally here. Even though the distance is still far, the people outside the city are running desperately towards the city gate at the first time. The Antillians are brave, but not stupid. In front of the plateau hounds, being alone will really kill you. Finally, as the last mercenary who was still outside the city rushed into the city, the gate of the Thorn territory slowly closed at this moment. Aaron hasn't come back yet. Staring at the smoke rising in the distance, León's mood was a little heavy. Although there were carts and horses escorting grain and grass arriving from time to time during this period, According to the guards transporting grain, they were only escorting a small part of the grain and grass. More grain was still on the way to Anatolia. The hounds migrated ahead of time. This is a rare thing and we had never expected it before. Todd was quite sorry about this, but he could only answer truthfully. Damn it. Leon cursed unhappily. My Lord Viscount, I apply to transfer 70 mercenaries to meet with Steward Aaron. The walls of the Thorn territory are strong. When there are still prey in the wild, the plateau hounds usually don't attack easily. Todd said in a deep voice. If you want to survive the winter, sufficient food is essential. What has arrived now is only the vanguard of the plateau hounds. If you can't escort the grain carts to arrive safely before the plateau hounds gather, then this winter will definitely be extremely tormenting. Okay. Leon nodded without hesitation. Aaron has lived in Anatolia for most of his life. He can say with certainty that from childhood to adulthood, he has never experienced such a rich winter, and never thought that he could buy so much food in the year of the jackdaw. Behind him, a fully loaded grain cart was slowly driving towards Anatolia. Antolia's moonlight velvet was sought after by almost all the nobles in Parma city. They were intoxicated by the exquisite and gorgeous silk, feeling the softness when their fingertips passed through it. This era is an era that belongs to the nobility, but it is also an era of extremely low productivity. Especially in peacetime, how can you show your status and show your nobility? This is almost a lingering question in the minds of all nobles. The appearance of moonlight velvet just meets the needs of the nobles. Although the clothes on the nobles are much better than those of ordinary people, how can they compare with moonlight velvet? So, when Aaron took out the first piece of silk, it triggered a frenzy of grabbing by the nobles present. As a result, the price of moonlight velvet, instead of gradually falling after a short period of popularity, has been rising under the frenzy of the nobles. Even though Aaron has kindly said that more moonlight velvet will flow into Parma after the cold winter, the nobles have turned a deaf ear to it. As for the reason, the nobles in Parma do not seem to believe that the Baron Anatolia can weave such gorgeous silk. They prefer to believe that this is an unexpected gain by the Anatolians when they were developing, blocking, the road, vice, robbing, business, robbery, and it was only this time. Therefore, Aaron had to temporarily change his countermeasures. While he repeatedly reiterated that Anatolia could already produce such gorgeous fabrics, he quietly let someone reveal the stock of moonlight velvet he brought this time, only more than 100 pieces. So, when the frenzy ended, the final average transaction price was in front of him, and Aaron could not help but be dumbfounded. The average transaction price of each piece of silk was as high as 20 escudos. More than 100 pieces of moonlight velvet were sold at a sky-high price of more than 2,000 gold coins. Chapter 13 Attack. Escudo, or gold coin for short. The income of more than 2,000 gold coins is undoubtedly a huge sum of money for Anatolia. This money is enough to buy enough food so that the people will no longer worry about food. Therefore, considering that the time of the hound's migration is actually difficult to determine, Aaron did not even bother to discuss a long-term supply agreement with the Bravis family, and hurried back with a full load of food. But man's plans are not as good as God's plans. Even though Aaron had ordered to return as quickly as possible, when the caravan was about to enter Anatolia, he still saw the smoke rising in the southwest. The migration of the Highland hounds has been advanced. Aaron gradually frowned. Compared with his own lord, Aaron, who is over 60 years old, has experienced more than 10 years of the jackdaw. Therefore, he knows better what the early migration of the hounds means. This means that the migration of the hounds will be larger in scale and more in number, and the hungry hounds will be more ferocious. Everyone, be alert. When Aaron gave the order, the mercenaries guarding the grain team had already picked up their weapons, ready to fight for their lives at any time. Their families were in the city, and behind them were the grain carts. If the grain they were guarding could not reach the Thorn territory, then their families might not be able to survive this winter. Perhaps what you fear will come true. With the sound of branches breaking in the jungle beside the road, the black shadow that every Anatolian remembered deeply gradually revealed its traces. Plateau hound. Roar. The hound's back was only about 1 meter above the ground, but its huge mouth stained with blood could be stretched to more than a person's height, presenting a sharp contrast like a giant python swallowing an antelope. Meet the enemy. Even Aaron, who is already over 50 years old, drew the sharp blade from the scabbard at this moment. Every mercenary present knew very well that the ferocious roar was a precursor to the plateau hound's imminent attack. Fortunately, There were not many hounds attacking at the moment, so as long as they fought to the death, they still had the strength to fight. However, compared to the mercenaries who advocated individual force, the hounds preferred to attack in groups. As a result, many soldiers were swallowed by the beasts that attacked from behind when they were fighting for their lives with flexible movements, and blood splattered. Form a formation. Form a formation. Aaron shouted loudly as he tried his best to avoid the hounds that attacked from behind. However, the duty of guarding the grain carts limited the range of activities of the mercenaries. Even though they knew that they should leave their backs to their comrades, they dared not leave the grain carts they were guarding. Just as the chaotic Anatolia created mercenaries who were good at fighting, this barren land also made the plateau hounds not only feed on flesh and blood. Even if it was food or wild fruits, as long as they could bite them, they would become food for these bastards in front of them. Aaron saw with his own eyes that a mercenary rushed towards the hound's open mouth with a sharp blade in his hand, fighting a difficult battle in a one-for-one manner. Finally, when the mercenaries were covered in blood, arrows shot from a distance brought hope of life to the people who were fighting bloody. Reinforcements are coming. The ground trembled slightly, and dust flew. The cavalrymen who had galloped all the way from the castle of Thorn territory, led by Todd, rushed into the battlefield without hesitation, ending the unexpected encounter on the way back to the city. Lord Aaron. Turning off his horse, Todd looked at the bloody butler, his eyes full of worry. Aaron shook his head and said, "I'm fine, my body is full of the blood of these hounds. Take people to count the losses. At least I brought back the food." Hearing this, Todd noticed the fully loaded grain carts behind Aaron. So many. He couldn't help but open his mouth wide and exclaimed, "Those nobles are really rich. Clean up the battlefield and gather the wounded." When the final result was delivered to Leon, the fallen mercenaries had become inconspicuous names on the croft paper. 11 people were killed, 3 were injured, 23 plateau hounds were killed, and the bodies of the mercenaries and hounds have been brought back. Aaron and Todd stood in front of their lord and reported the situation of the battle truthfully. Judging from the data alone, it seems that the plateau hounds suffered more casualties. But on one side are people, and on the other side are beasts. How can the two be compared? Which of the dead mercenaries is not an elite? Which of them is not the most precious asset of Anatolia? They are all fighting for Anatolia, and the families of the fallen mercenaries must be properly resettled. Leon said in a deep voice. If Leon had set the departure time earlier, this encounter would not have happened, and no one would have been killed. But as a lord, at least in Leon's opinion, he should admit his mistakes and correct them but not admit them. Besides, who would have expected that the hounds would migrate early? Understood. The two said in unison. Although he got a positive answer, Leon still felt unreassured. After all, Mrs. Mitchell was the wife of an Anatolian mercenary, but she lived in poverty and hardship after her husband died. So Leon added, if there are women in the family, let them go to work in the textile workshop. If there are children, they will be supported by the Ximena family, and report to me in time after they are settled, and the same will be true in the future. From now on, this is the practice of Anatolia. There were no conditions before, but now, Moonlight Velvet has captured the admiration of countless nobles in the city of Parma, and money and food are constantly coming in. At least in terms of comforting the families of the fallen mercenaries, there is naturally no need to be stingy. You are a kind lord. Hearing Leon's order, Todd couldn't help but kneel on one knee. Todd, who is also a mercenary, can best understand the difficulty of walking on the edge of death. Leon's move just cleared the worries of hundreds of mercenaries in Anatolia. Get up. Leon said calmly. He wanted to do this for a long time, but he was always restricted by the money and food of the territory and could not do it. Now that he has the opportunity and he has more money on hand, it is natural to use this opportunity to win people's hearts. This time, thanks to Uncle Aaron, he was able to adapt to the situation and brought a lot of money and food to the territory, and he also personally took a knife and killed the hound. Leon then looked at his butler, his eyes were quite happy. But Leon changed the subject and continued, although the money and food are available, the migration of hounds this time is huge, and more people must be sent to patrol both during the day and at night. My Lord Viscount. When Leon's voice fell, Aaron seemed to have made up his mind and finally spoke. The early migration of hounds usually means a huge scale and more numbers. I think the method of diverting trouble to the east that you mentioned earlier can be arranged for someone to do it. Although Aaron had not commented on Leon's idea before, Only after surviving this winter would he be qualified to think about whether this move would surprise his neighbors. Since the current situation in Anatolia is not optimistic, we have to drag everyone into the water together. Todd. Please rest assured, my lord, I have already arranged agile hands and equipped them with fast horses to lure hounds, which will surely make the nobles near Anatolia also feel the danger of hounds attacking the city. Todd nodded and said in a deep voice. Chapter 14, Ancient Stories and Ancient Magic. The bodies of the hounds were neatly arranged in the courtyard in front of the castle. For the Anatolians, even if Aaron brought enough food to the territory, the dead hounds were still a valuable meat. At any time, any grain of food should be cherished, which is particularly important to the Anatolians. Perhaps because of the physique of the plateau hounds, which is somewhat similar to that of Warcraft, this ingredient, called monster meat by the Anatolians, is not delicious, but it can bring great benefits to the eater. The reason why the mercenaries still have strong bodies and thick waists in this land of food shortage is that many of them are due to these monster meats. However, looking at the bodies of the plateau hounds, Leon always has a sense of déjà vu. They seem to have a very special aura on their bodies, and this aura seems to be slightly similar to the shadow monsters he caught. When in doubt, scientific instruments, this is one of the many good habits Leon has formed since coming to the territory. Instead of guessing, it is better to ask your own golden finger. A shadow monster, a plateau hound that had been chopped into small pieces. Leon had become more and more proficient in using scientific instruments. He sat beside the scientific instruments and waited for a while. The papyrus soon gave Leon the answer he wanted. Black fog. Just as Leon had previously speculated. The diffuse black fog created a unique biological community in Anatolia, and the plateau hounds were precisely mutant species born under the influence of the black fog. According to the records on the papyrus, these strange hounds have no gender distinction. If you have to give a definition to their gender, they can be male or female, they can be Walmart shopping bags or armed helicopters, and the main feature is that they are gender fluid. They will breathe new life in the black fog and pass on the wisdom and memory of the race. In short, only the diffuse black fog can create the conditions for the reproduction of plateau hounds. The papyrus did not give a solution to the plateau hounds, but it also made Leon fall into deep thought. Every year of the jackdaw, there will be a steady stream of hounds plundering in Anatolia, but due to the barrier of the mountains, the black fog in Anatolia is extremely thin, which is not enough to create conditions for the asexual reproduction of plateau hounds. And this may mean that there must be a road to the abandoned land of the gods in the southwest of Anatolia. Otherwise, there is no way to explain the hound invasion every 5 years. Abandoned land. Leon's judgment on this made him a little sluggish for a while. Whether it is his own golden finger or the shadow monsters captured by him, they seem to have 1,000 connections with the land on the other side of the mountains. Leon doesn't know whether this connection is good or bad. The ancestors did build a civilization far more powerful than today, but they disappeared at the time of their greatest prosperity. But now he has no other choice. Whether it is the moonlight velvet that brings countless money and food to Anatolia, or the ancient magic that can improve with strength, they all come from the legacy of the ancestors. After this cold winter, it seems necessary to go to the other side of the mountain. After pondering for a long time, Leon finally set a stage goal for himself. Unknown is usually what Leon hates the most, but now he can only accept it. Because in the books and the ancient archives, he not only saw the future of Anatolia, but also saw his hope of becoming a great wizard. Ancient magic. With the arrival of winter, Leon gradually had free time. In addition to taking time out every day to guide the training of the Anatolia Fire volunteer team, he spent almost all his time studying ancient magic. The staff made of elk geese has proved the high attainments of the ancestors in magic. Now that the hounds are besieging the city and Anatolia is facing the challenge of winter, Leon naturally wants to do everything he can to improve his strength. Leon didn't find too many books related to magic in the archives before, just for one reason, that is, the names are different. Priest, wizard, these are the names of the ancestors for wizards. Therefore, when Leon's sight was no longer limited to mages, he found that there were many records related to magic in the archives. In today's era, although mages are respected, even the poorest civilians can talk endlessly about the power of mages, but no one has ever been able to really explain the origin of magic. The currently recognized view is that the great wizard Merlin discovered the existence of magic hundreds of years ago, and created a spell that can use this power with the help of the elves, which made him the greatest wizard in history. But in the archives, Leon found a different answer. At least, he found the answer that the ancestors thought: magic runes. According to the records in the archives, thousands of years ago, the ancestors found countless broken stone slabs on the vast land, and various strange symbols were engraved on these indestructible stone slabs. There seemed to be an awe-inspiring power in these strange symbols. Whether it was birds or beasts, they avoided these broken stone slabs and dared not approach them at any time. The ancestors regarded these stone slabs as treasures. They believed that this was a gift from the gods and a reliance for them to survive in a harsh environment. Therefore, the ancestors built towns with these stone slabs as the center, forming countless settlements distributed on the continent. Until the appearance of the man, Saruman, the greatest priest in the mouth of the ancestors, the embodiment of wisdom and power. Saruman saw a special power in the runes on the stone slabs. It was he who, with a power of my thinking similar to that of the Babylonian leader Hammurabi, translated the runes engraved on the stone slabs into long but amazing spells. This is the beginning of ancient magic. Several ancient magic spells are recorded in the old books of the archives. These spells are extremely long, and just a few spells almost occupy most of the content of the book. But it was these spells that almost made Leon's brain crash on the spot, and he was stunned. Because he recognized the first spell. Although the spell in front of him is long and complicated, it has the same effect as the fireball spell. In layman's terms, if the spells in ancient magic are regarded as the original version, then the spells that wizards are currently pursuing are nothing more than simplified, abbreviated, and phonetic versions. Merlin's contribution, although it shortened the length of the originally lengthy spell, also reduced the power of the spell by several levels. After all, according to the records in the book, the power of this spell is enough to burn rivers and boil rivers, comparable to a forbidden spell. The shortened fireball spell, even if it is performed by the strongest wizard at present, is probably at most to enlarge Leon's fireball with a diameter of 20 to 30 centimeters to a fireball with a diameter of 70 to 80 centimeters. Ancient magic. At this moment, Leon's eyes gradually changed from shock to determination. He wants to learn ancient magic. Today is World Outer Day, please read. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15. Watch me fight the enemy with one hand, to set an example for you. Setting a flag is a very easy thing, and it is about the same difficulty as voting for a monthly ticket. Therefore, Leon set the goal of learning ancient magic very firmly at the first time. Because this is the only way he can see to improve his own strength. However, even if he has a golden finger, it is not easy to achieve this goal. His golden finger is not too weak, but too strong. There is a whole archive of books. Just wanting to find books that match his current magic level is an extremely huge project. Not to mention that learning ancient magic with Leon's current cognition is about the same difficulty as asking elementary school students to learn classical Chinese and recite a Li Sao by the way. There must be someone who can do it, but unfortunately this does not include Leon. Fortunately, Leon is very satisfied with the opportunity to learn ancient magic, and naturally he will not ask for more. The flames in the fireplace bring comfortable warmth in the cold winter, and the food reserves in the territory become particularly abundant after the sale of Moonlight Velvet. The only sound in the room was the sound of Leon flipping through the pages of his book, which brought Leon a rare peace in this year of the jackdaws when the hounds attacked. On the training ground. The mercenaries sat around the sidelines, chatting and sizing up and down the volunteers who were training. The guy on the far right of the second row is a good candidate. Nonsense. The third one on the right of the first row is the one. Although he is not as strong as that guy, he is strong enough. Let's make a bet. Okay. We never. Shut up. What a bet. Todd's scolding put an end to the mercenaries' aimless chatter. I asked you to come here to help others train, not to let you come here to comment. Boss. Tell me, how to train. The mercenary on the side asked with a smile. Send 10 good fighters to practice with the new recruits later. This is the Viscount's order. Winter is coming, so it is necessary to review their training results during this period. 10. As soon as Todd finished speaking, the people present were stunned for a moment, and then there was a commotion. Some people even wanted to laugh. I can beat a bunch of rookies by myself. The young mercenary Stein chuckled. As the best of the new generation of mercenaries in Anatolia, Stein, who was only 20 years old, had already been recognized by the mercenaries and even trained by Todd. He was a rare talent. Not only was he outstanding in archery and had a high level of attainment, but he also relied on his strong muscles to fight 2 fully armed knights alone. He was even more brave and respected in the fight with the plateau hounds. Seeing that Stein was so confident, Todd simply said, "In that case, let's go up and have a try." Even he himself did not dare to be so careless to fight against the 100 young men in front of him, and Todd felt that it was necessary to suppress Stein's arrogance and conceit. "Don't worry, just watch me fight the enemy with one hand and set an example for everyone." After that, Stein took a wooden stick from the sidelines and fought on the field, and then shouted, "Come on, boys. Draw your swords." Only the young man in the lead shouted, and the recruits who had been ready to fight immediately raised their wooden swords. Nearly a month of training has already made these young people eager to try. At first, they may not understand the meaning of training, or they may just want to make a living. But when the team consciousness gradually formed and the concept of honor and disgrace gradually established, the young recruits also wanted to test their own strength. Yes, as Leon's money and food gradually became abundant, the original Anatolian Fire volunteer team finally had a formal organization. At this time, they had a new name, Recruits. And Stein in front of him, wanted to beat them all by himself. The contempt in the mercenaries' eyes and the frivolous words aroused the competitive spirit in the recruits. If it were in the past, even if they would definitely not be able to beat them one-on-one, the boldness in the bones of the Anatolians would definitely make them rush up and fight with the mercenaries. But now, they need orders. Forward. With shields in their left hands and knives in their right hands, the recruits marched towards Stein in a neat formation. Although they may have some trepidation in their hearts, the concept of obeying orders has already subtly influenced their actions. Damn it! Almost at the moment when the recruits formed a formation, Stein realized his carelessness. 100 recruits marched in neat rows. Even though Stein had combat experience and his weapon had seen blood, he could not, holding a wooden stick, be as unstoppable as he had expected in the siege of hundreds of people. The mercenaries who had been laughing and bragging outside the field finally became serious at this moment. Todd looked at the scene in front of him calmly, and he had expected it. He had seen with his own eyes the great changes that had taken place in the recruits during this period of time, and he had also seen with his own eyes how wonderful the training methods of his lord were. The reason why he asked the mercenaries to come here to watch the training of the recruits was to find an opportunity. Todd knew that his lord had other great uses for the mercenaries of Anatolia, and he had never intended to apply a similar template to the mercenaries. Therefore, this was not an opportunity for the mercenaries to receive the same training, but an opportunity to establish prestige for his lord. With a powerful enemy at hand, only by unifying thoughts first can Leon's orders be implemented throughout the army. When Todd once again cast his eyes on the training ground, the confident Stein had already retreated to the edge of the field under the pressure of the recruits. Although Stein had also swung the wooden stick in his hand vigorously, and even knocked down dozens of recruits who came forward. However, these recruits who had been trained by Leon himself did not panic like the enemies he had encountered before. On the contrary, even if the comrades beside him were knocked to the ground by Stein, there would be recruits to fill the position immediately, so that Stein could hardly breathe for a moment. Finally, a recruit who seemed a little weak saw the opportunity, raised the back of the wooden sword and slapped Stein's back, and the young mercenary fell to the ground. For a while, the recruits cheered. Although this time it was a bit like the majority bullying the minority, it was still the first small victory achieved by the recruits. Looking at the young mercenary who fell to the ground, Stein's previous words seemed to still echo in the field: "Watch me fight the enemy with one hand, and set an example for everyone." Happy Children's Day, fellow book friends. Chapter 16, Fierce Battle. For Anatolia, the year of the jackdaw often means a shortage of food and a decrease in population, but the people living in this land have long been accustomed to this. Perhaps it is precisely because of this that the Anatolians have never had any good feelings towards the gods. The gods have never saved them, and the church has never helped them. From beginning to end, the Anatolians can only rely on themselves. However, this year's winter is very different. The new lord of Anatolia has brought new vitality to this crowded city and to the people living in the territory of thorns. Especially a few days ago, when the fully loaded rain slowly drove in from the city gate, The Antolians felt a sense of security in their hearts that they had never experienced before. They have never seen so much food in their lives, and never seen such a long caravan. With this food, people no longer have to fight with hounds to find food in the wild. They can completely rely on the solid city walls, look down from a high place, and defend their homes with weapons in their hands. It was from that moment that the name of León Ximena, the young Viscount of Antolia and the patriarch of the Ximena family, was finally deeply imprinted in the minds of all the subjects. It turns out that weaving trees can really be exchanged for food. Although the frost and snow in winter never stop, the textile workshops are running almost day and night. At Leon's request, the subjects have already cut down enough raw materials in the moon mushroom forest to supply the textile workshops for a whole winter. The textile women workers are also motivated by the Andal silver coins. Mrs. Mitchell divides the workers into 3 shifts, working day and night. Every night, the candles that were previously only available to nobles will support the dim light in the textile workshop. Although candles in this era are extremely expensive, compared with the value that moonlight velvet can create, this little expense is really insignificant. In fact, even after seeing the food Aaron brought back, Leon still felt unbelievable, but the countless food and golden escudos were right in front of him, and he couldn't help but believe it. The workers worked diligently in the workshop, the recruits sweated on the training ground, and the mercenaries patrolled the city walls. The difficult year of the jackdaw came in peace. However, it will not end in peace. The humans living here are not the primary target of the hounds. They will now be in the wild of Antolia, looking for all possible prey. Until the food in the wild can't fill their hungry stomachs, these ferocious beasts will attack human cities regardless of casualties. This period of time can be long or short, from dozens of days to 3 or 5 days. This year, the hounds only gave Leon 3 days. Leon stood on the city wall, staring at the black figures gathering at the edge of the forest in the distance, and couldn't help frowning. There are too many. When countless hounds gathered together, they looked like a dark cloud covering the sky above Antolia. Although the scale of this hound migration had been expected, the actual number was far beyond everyone's expectations. Even Aaron, who is well informed, had never seen such a large number of dogs before. I felt a fluctuation of magic power, an extremely dangerous breath. Leon said in a deep voice. During this period, he had been studying ancient magic in his lord's castle. Although he could not say that he had made great progress, his understanding of magic was more profound. Therefore, when he stood on the city wall, he immediately sensed the fluctuation of magic power in the hound pack not far from the city. Leon turned his head and asked Aaron and Todd, who were standing beside him, "Are you sure there are no magic beasts in that hound pack? Have there been similar situations before?" "Never in recent decades." Aaron smiled bitterly and shook his head. The winter sun shone obliquely on his face, and a trace of worry flashed across his wrinkled face. Leon keenly sensed the meaning of Aaron's words and asked, "What do you mean?" "It only appeared once, and there are only a few words in the chronicles of the Ximena family, and there has never been a detailed record. The only useful information is that the year of the jackdaw caused heavy casualties in Antolia. Warcraft. The warcraft in this world has never had any level divisions like the 1st to 9th levels. The ability to use magic during life and to be used as magic materials after death is the biggest feature of the warcraft in this world. Everyone, be alert, all mercenaries and recruits go to the city walls, and at the same time, summon all civilians with weapons to patrol the streets. In addition, send arrows to every hunter and mercenary." Leon immediately gave the order. "Yes. Plateau hounds can even dig the ground and dig graves, so climbing the city walls is no problem. Their sharp claws can be firmly stuck in the cracks of the bricks on the city wall, and then use the power of their forelimbs to make them jump onto the city wall. And their most vulnerable time is when they have not climbed the city wall and are exposed in the wild without any cover." Leon raised the staff in his hand, and he silently chanted this spell in his mouth. In a moment, colorful colors seemed to flash in his pupils. Twilight Eye. This is the only ancient magic that Leon can use freely after these days of research. As for the effect of this spell, it basically makes Leon a human telescope. With a waving of the staff, Leon's sight crossed the solid city wall, swept across the open field, and clearly fell on the gathering hounds in the distance. He was looking for the plateau hound that made him feel the magic breath. There is a saying in Antolia that the black-naped yellow goose that loses its head bird is difficult to cross the continuous mountains. The general meaning is to capture the king first. As Leon's sight swept over, he seemed to feel the gaze from afar. It was an exceptionally tall plateau hound. Compared to its kind, it has a third eye on its huge forehead, like a surging vortex, which caused an inexplicable throbbing in Leon's heart. Finally, when the midday sun gradually tilted to the west, there was a commotion among the hounds. The hounds that were originally entrenched on the edge seemed to have received some kind of guidance in a moment, and rushed towards the wall of the thorn territory. In an instant, the people on the wall felt the tremor of the land, and also discovered the movement not far away at the first time. Looking at the swarming black figures, Todd's face was full of determination. He looked at the soldiers around him and shouted loudly, "Shoot! I personally feel that this plot is a bit dragged out. It will be concluded tomorrow. If the pace is slow, I hope everyone will mention it in the description of this chapter." Chapter 17 Chapter 17:18 brings a little ancient shock to Anatolia. The packs of wild dogs were like running wolves. Any mercenary from Anatolia could easily kill a plateau hound in a duel. However, when countless hounds gathered together and surged like a tide, everyone would feel a deadly threat under the dark and gloomy waves. This was exactly the case at this moment. The packs of dogs running towards the city wall lifted up the wet soil and dry branches on the bumpy ground. Their innate keen sense of smell allowed these hungry creatures to smell the breath of humans in the city even if they were 100 meters away, and their eyes flashed with greed and bloodthirstiness. When the plateau hounds were running in the wilderness before approaching the city wall, they were at their most vulnerable. With Todd's roar, countless arrows flew through the air, and the dense rain of arrows almost instantly enveloped the hounds' heads. Some of these arrows were shot by soldiers on the city walls, and some were shot by hunters who came to the front line spontaneously. Living in the land of Anatolia, it is difficult to survive without some force. Apart from mercenaries, hunters are the most beloved profession of Anatolia men. Although their actual combat level is difficult to compare with mercenaries, most of the time they just wander in the mountains and forests, fighting with prey with bows and daggers, but the tempering of blood and death has also enabled them to stand up in times of crisis. However, the dense rain of arrows did not cause too much damage to the rushing hounds. The black mane covering their backs, at this moment, became the shield that the hounds relied on most. Even if it worked, it was difficult to stop their running. Finally, as the first hound embedded its claws into the gap in the city wall and began to climb up, what awaited the Anatolians would be the most brutal battle. The combat capability of the mercenaries is beyond doubt, and Todd was temporarily appointed by Leon as the commander of the Anatolian Fire Volunteer Team. Raise your shield. Draw your sword. With the issuance of one command after another, the slightly agitated recruits seemed to have regained the feeling of training and the familiar sound of the command. The palms of the recruits were already sweaty, but they still stood firmly in their positions. When the low roar came into their ears, a huge and ugly gray-black head poked out from the edge of the city wall. Todd was quick-eyed and quick-handed, raising the giant axe in his hand and chopped it down violently. In an instant, the splash of blood opened the curtain of war. For the plateau hounds, all Anatolians were full of hatred. No matter who they were, almost all of them had experienced the pain of their relatives being killed by hounds. Therefore, without any hesitation, almost everyone entered the state of battle at the first time, even the recruits who had only been trained for more than a month. They used their shields to push the hounds, which had not yet stood firm, off the city wall, and used their swords to protect the city behind them. In just a moment, the soldiers were all stained with blood. The plateau hounds' originally fierce offensive was also stagnant under the solid city wall and the soldiers' desperate resistance. However, just as Leon was rejoicing in his wise decision to form the Anatolia Fire Volunteer Team, he finally felt the strong magic fluctuations. The source of the magic fluctuations was the mutant monster standing outside the city and surrounded by dogs. It raised its head and let out a hoarse roar. Its originally tall body suddenly expanded several times, and then it rushed towards the city wall like crazy. Oops. Leon immediately realized that it was not good. If the behemoth not far away really rushed up, the city wall of Thorn territory would probably suffer a devastating blow. My Lord Viscount. It's too dangerous here, please return to the Lord's castle immediately. The guard standing beside Leon couldn't help but said anxiously. But Leon turned a deaf ear to it. He just stood quietly on the top of the city wall and raised the staff in his hand again. Then, the fast-moving giant shadow suddenly hit the city wall. Leon could clearly feel the bricks and stones under his feet shaking under the strong impact. Accompanied by a loud noise like the collapse of the sky and the sound of bricks and stones breaking, The originally solid city wall finally exposed a gap about 6 or 7 meters long under this violent impact. The soldiers standing on that section of the city wall were also shaken down by the violent collision, and fell heavily on the ground, and there was no movement in an instant. Stop the gap. León almost didn't need to give orders, and the mercenaries around jumped down along the broken city wall one after another, trying to use their flesh and blood to stop the swarming beasts. As the commander, Todd also led the way and stood in the front row. Row after row, the soldiers held up wooden shields, trying to resist the mad bites of the hounds, but every attack almost left a deep slip mark on the ground under their feet. Many soldiers' arms holding up shields had already become numb or even lost consciousness under the constant attack of the hounds, but they still relied on their own perseverance to support. The heavy and crazy collision made many soldiers standing in the front line fly backwards, but even if they vomited blood, they still resisted the dizziness in their minds and struggled to find the fallen weapons on the ground. Every time a soldier fell, another soldier would immediately take his place. At this moment, they had only one belief in their hearts, that is, to block the gap in the city wall and keep the hounds in front of them out of the city. They had no choice, because behind them were their families. My Lord Viscount. The guards around were about to persuade León to leave again, but they saw a huge fireball gradually forming on the top of León's staff. As a mage, León had only watched his soldiers engage in a bloody battle without taking action before, because he was waiting for this moment to come. León didn't know what the difference was between the hound that looked like a monster, so he kept waiting. This process was painful, because he could only watch the soldiers who swore allegiance to him die tragically on the city wall and be torn to pieces by the bloodthirsty beasts. In the final analysis, León was just a mage apprentice. So facing the monster of unknown strength, he could only choose to go all out. And now, it's time. When the gap appeared in the city wall, countless hounds turned around and swarmed towards the gap on the city wall, which greatly reduced the defensive pressure on the city wall. León tapped his staff lightly, and a fireball with a diameter of about 40 to 50 centimeters instantly shot towards the mutant hound in the center of the pack. Boom! A violent explosion sounded, and 5 or 6 hounds were thrown into the sky in the explosion, and then fell heavily. It seemed that the previous collision with the city wall had exhausted the power in the body of the monster, and the mutant hound, whose body had expanded several times, was also blown away. Question mark? That's it. Looking at the scene in front of him, León was a little confused. However, this also allowed León to cast magic more unscrupulously. It's time to give these damn things a little ancient shock. With the research on ancient magic during this period, although León could not replicate the ancient magic that was like a forbidden spell, after fully combining with ancient magic, León had a lot of experience in using fireballs. At least, it made him learn something different. Since the power of a single fireball was not enough, León chose to win by quantity. Fireballs appeared one after another on the top of León's staff, and then they shot towards the gathering hounds. The diameter of these fireballs was very short, only a dozen centimeters, but they were just stuck at the threshold that could form an explosion and kill the hounds. So, at this moment, the young lord standing on the city wall was like a turret that could continuously fire fireballs. Every few seconds, a fireball with enough power would form on the top of the staff. On the battlefield, flames were everywhere. The successive explosions greatly disrupted the attack rhythm of the hounds, and also allowed the soldiers who were fighting bloody to get a moment of respite. Todd, who had just killed the hound, took advantage of the brief moment to look at his own lord, who was standing on the city wall and killing people. His mind was a little confused for a while. Is this really the strength that a mage apprentice should have? Exclamation mark. León didn't know what others were thinking. At this time, he just kept chanting spells and releasing fireballs one after another. He did not find the method of using forbidden spells in ancient magic, but he understood how to release magic at a faster speed while saving his own consumption to the greatest extent. But even so, the continuous casting of magic also made León's magic power gradually reach the bottom. So, under the stunned gaze of the guards on both sides, the young lord took out a fat shadow monster from somewhere and held it in his hand. That's a shadow monster. Everyone present knew the existence of shadow monsters. This special creature that exists in this world is extremely difficult to see on weekdays, let alone touch. Only in certain specific environments or next to a dying person will it gradually manifest its body. Once this creature manifests its body, it will easily take someone's life, which is terrifying. However, The lord of his own family not only held the shadow monster in his hand in such a swagger, but also squeezed the fat and round belly of the shadow monster with his left hand from time to time, as if he was squeezing out endless magic power from the shadow monster's body. With the shadow monster in his hand, the apprentice of the mage, who should have been exhausted of magic power, was instantly revived with full blood. Even the speed of releasing magic was much faster and faster than before, like a tireless machine gun, which brought an indescribable shock to everyone present. The dense fireballs almost instantly covered the fan-shaped area centered on Leon, and the bodies of the hounds were ignited with different colored flames. With the shadow monster in his left hand and the staff in his right hand, the young lord was tirelessly killing people with his ordinary fireball technique. At this time, Leon had no time to consider how to explain the existence of the shadow monster after the war, nor did he have the mind to consider these trivialities in the future. He only knew that behind him was the territory of his family and the people who depended on the Ximena family. If the gap in the city wall cannot be defended, then Anatolia will suffer a very heavy blow, and his future plans for Anatolia will probably be difficult to continue. At the same time, the recruits have already formed a formation at the gap in the city wall. They may have fear and panic in their hearts, but the swords in their hands have never hesitated. When people face the threat of death, the power they can burst out will be infinite. With a surge of adrenaline, the soldiers have already killed Red Eyes, and they don't care about whether their physical strength can support it. The soldiers fought bloody and released fireballs continuously. The most difficult battle lasted for nearly half a day, and the bodies of the plateau hounds almost filled the ground. Finally, when more and more hounds fell outside the Thorn territory, those bloodthirsty and ferocious beasts finally felt the strength of this city. The afterglow of the setting sun sprinkled on the battlefield full of blood, leaving only the mess on the ground and the hounds fleeing in panic. Even Leon, who was wielding a staff, felt the pain and swelling in his forearms, not to mention the soldiers who had been fighting the beasts with shields, swords and spears from beginning to end. After the intense battle, intense fatigue followed. Looking at the beasts that left in a panic, the soldiers who had been fighting for several hours in a row did not care about the blood all over the ground, and most of them sat down on the ground. They no longer had the energy to cheer, and even had no energy to collect the bodies of their fallen comrades. "My Lord Viscount, we won." The soldiers who had been guarding Leon cheered loudly. Previously, they also wanted to fight the enemy with their comrades. But they also knew clearly that only by protecting the Lord Viscount, who had been acting as a human turret, could they pose a greater threat to the hounds. And now, the fierce battle is over, and the Antilians have won the war. Finally won. Leon supported his equally tired body with his arms, looking down over the battlements. Countless corpses of hounds were piled up together, and dark red blood dyed the city wall red and seeped into the gaps between bricks and stones. "Go back first, Lord Viscount." Aaron carefully supported the slightly exhausted Leon and asked softly. "Go back." This time, Leon did not refuse. Although it was only evening, the continuous release of magic had already made Leon's spirit extremely tired. After just a few words to Aaron, Leon fell asleep. The flames in the fireplace burned fiercely, dispelling the winter frost and snow, leaving only the rare warmth. There is no more chapters. Today's 2 chapters are combined and posted together. Please vote and read. Free recommendation votes are also fine. Chapter 18 Casualties and Gains. When Leon woke up from his sleep, it was already the next morning. The warm sunlight shone in, dispelling Leon's fatigue and depression from the previous day. He slowly opened his eyes. His mind was blank, but the familiar furnishings in the room still made Leon's originally tense heart relax a lot. After a long time, he finally remembered the difficult battle yesterday, and the blood and corpses all over the ground. Water. Leon felt a little dry in his mouth, and Aaron, who had been waiting outside the door, heard the Viscount's voice and slowly walked into the room. After drinking a glass of cool spring water, Leon came to his senses and asked Aaron beside him, "Did we win?" "Won." Hearing this, Aaron nodded repeatedly, and for a moment he was a little tearful. Any Antolian is well aware of the difficulties of the Year of the Jackdaw. The scale of the hound invasion this year is the first in recent decades. However, facing the hound swarming in, the Antilians defended the broken walls and the city behind them. At this time, Aaron still clearly remembered the heroic appearance of his lord. Gently waving the staff, the fireball burst out, and the whole battlefield was warm under the continuous explosions. "The Viscount is too strong." As for kneading the shadow monster with bare hands, it proves the Viscount's powerful strength. Not to mention the mage apprentice, the real mage can't do this. In Aaron's heart, his lord is too stable, even a little too low-key. The hounds have all retreated. Although they are still wandering in the woods, they should not dare to launch another attack for a while. What's more, although those Highland hounds are ferocious and bloodthirsty, they are not stupid. Since yesterday's battle has proved that the Thorn territory is a hard bone to chew, they will surely cast their targets elsewhere. Aaron analyzed with reason. The plateau hounds have a clear division of labor, just like what Aaron encountered during the previous grain transportation process, which was the hounds that acted as scouts. Now, calculating the time, those scattered scouts are estimated to have brought the news back to the hounds. As for the other places mentioned by Aaron, they naturally refer to the northern nobles who have been watching from the sidelines in the years of Jackdaw. In particular, the fiefs of the two nobles, the Earl of Greywater City and the Viscount of Shunmulan, who are close to Antolia, are the two noble fiefs closest to Antolia, but due to the relatively long distance, they have never been attacked by plateau hounds before. And now, since the plateau hounds have nothing in the Thorn territory, it is natural for them to look elsewhere. What are our losses? After a moment, Leon finally asked the topic that he had never wanted to mention. Aaron was silent for a while, and then said with some embarrassment, heavy casualties. You tell me, I have already expected this. Leon couldn't help but sigh. Although we won yesterday, it was only a bitter victory. The hard battle was bound to cause a large number of casualties. This was an irreversible fact. Although we defended the city in this battle, Antolia also suffered heavy losses. Aaron paused, carefully looked at Leon's face, and then continued, in this battle, more than 70 mercenaries were killed or wounded, and more than 60 new recruits you recruited were killed or wounded, nearly 2/3. In addition, nearly 100 hunters and civilians in the city were also killed or wounded. The total number of casualties is nearly 300. 300 casualties may not sound like much, but for the Thorn territory, which has a total population of only more than 3,000 people, this can be regarded as an extremely heavy blow. The number of casualties accounts for 1/10 of the total population. Even if most of the casualties are just injured, according to the proportion, the number of deaths will be about 100, but it is still quite tragic. And all Leon can do now is to try to maintain the lives of the wounded. Take out all the liquor stored in the castle. All. Aaron felt that his lord's thinking was a little jumpy, so he had to confirm again. Yes, all. Take people to distribute all the liquor in the family cellar and use it to apply to the soldiers' wounds. Leon nodded and said with certainty. Even though Leon didn't know much about modern medicine in his previous life, he knew a little about the principle of alcohol disinfection. Since there is no high-proof alcohol, he can make do with liquor. The physical fitness of the Antolians is different from that of ordinary people, and it may not be impossible to have the same bactericidal and anti-inflammatory effect. Although it is unlikely to be as effective as high-concentration alcohol, it is better to have it than not. First disinfect with liquor, then wrap it with fine linen, and be sure to take good care of it to minimize the loss of personnel caused by wound infection. Also, the cloth strips used to wrap the wound must be steamed in boiling water. As he spoke, Leon quickly searched for the steps to treat the wound in his memory. Although it may look a little crude, it is obviously countless times better than the level of military doctors in this era. After all, even simple disinfection and sterilization are beyond people's cognition in this era. Aaron was a little confused about Leon's instructions, but he still nodded seriously. After this battle, he already knew in his heart that it was difficult to guess the knowledgeable Viscount in front of him with common sense. After talking about the aftermath and treatment of the wounded, the room seemed a little depressed. So, in Aaron's long-lost eyes, Leon finally asked, "Tell me about the harvest of this battle." A lot of harvest. At this moment, a trace of victory finally appeared on the faces of the two. Just the corpses of 500 or 600 Highland hounds counted at the moment. If all of them are dried into jerky, it will weigh tens of thousands of pounds, and can even hang all over the walls of Thorn territory. Then hang it up. Leon said in a deep voice. The corpses of hundreds of plateau hounds not only demonstrate Antolia's strength and deter the plateau hounds, but also inject a shot of adrenaline into the people living on this land. What's more, in addition to drying it into jerky, the canine teeth of the plateau hounds are also a rare good thing. The daggers made from canine teeth are extremely sharp, even sharper than ordinary iron daggers. Good. Hearing this, Aaron answered readily. All the people living on this land have the desire to kill a plateau hound. And such a move will push the prestige of this young lord to an unprecedented level. Directly changed to strong liquor. About wine, I searched for it with a bactericidal effect, but the effect is not ideal with a low degree. It was common to use wine for disinfection and sterilization in the Middle Ages in Europe, so I think the protagonist's approach is reasonable. Since some readers think that there is a big toxicity here, I collected relevant information. However, the description of external use in the information is relatively vague. Although Baidu says that it can be used externally, the relevant journals only give examples from ancient Greece, ancient Rome, Hippocrates, Galen and others. Although it is mentioned that it has a bactericidal effect, it is not clearly stated. I have not studied medicine. According to my current understanding, it can be used externally. If it is indeed not allowed, please remind me in time and I will make corrections. References: 1. Wenjianhu. Research on the medicinal history of wine, J. Journal of Jinsong University, 2018, 35, 03. 36-40. Chapter 19, Winter in Greywater Castle. For the Earl of Greywater Castle, Eli Wayne, it was another boring and long winter day. With the coming of winter, prey in the mountains and forests became increasingly scarce, so that even going out hunting, the most common entertainment activity in the Andal Kingdom, became boring. The sudden snowstorm a few days ago also made the noble banquet that the middle-aged Earl originally planned to hold come to nothing. After a glass of wine, the Earl of Greywater Castle couldn't help but recall the swaying figure of Mrs. Meteran in his mind. Although Mrs. Meteran is a married woman, this is really normal in the circle of nobles. After all, even though the Earl of Greywater Castle is over 40 years old and his fat body is as much as 200 pounds, he is an earl. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel more and more disgusted with this sudden snowfall. If it weren't for the snowfall, he would definitely be able to renew his relationship with Mrs. Meteran. Damn it! Where's the wine? Looking at the empty wine glass in front of him, the Earl couldn't help but curse. Just as he was about to curse again, he saw a knight stumbling into the banquet hall. "My lord Earl. It's bad." "What?" While asking, the Earl of Greywater Castle had to take the bottle of wine on the table and fill it up for himself. "Hounds. Lots of hounds." The intruding knight shouted a little breathlessly. "Hounds? It's snowing, and it's time to stop hunting. Have someone take good care of the hounds. They're all my treasures." The Earl of Greywater Castle burped, and his hazy eyes revealed obvious dissatisfaction, as if he was quite unhappy with the knight in front of him who disturbed him from drinking. "It's not your hound, it's a plateau hound from the south." Seeing that his lord was still half drunk and half awake, the knight hurriedly said anxiously, "Highland hounds?" "Yes." The knight nodded repeatedly and emphasized, "The Highland hounds of Antolia, those Highland hounds with sharp fangs and black manes." "Highland hounds, what?" In an instant, the fat earl seemed to remember something, and his drunken face was gradually replaced by a feeling of panic and confusion. Originally, he was about to overflow with thoughts about Mrs. Meteran, but when he heard this, he suddenly shuddered. Although Greywater Castle is a neighbor of Antolia, the creatures that ravaged Antolia have never appeared in the land he ruled. Over the years, when the people of Antolia were fighting against the Highland hounds and struggling to survive in the harsh natural environment, Greywater Castle was luxurious. Noble banquets, social dances, hunting trips, night competitions. All kinds of activities are not lacking. Except for those civilians who cower outside the city and suffer from hunger and cold, the winter in Greywater Castle can be regarded as peaceful. And now, those Highland hounds that caused heavy casualties to the Antolians actually appeared in his territory? Exclamation mark. Even though he had never seen them with his own eyes, Count Eli Wayne of Greywater Castle had heard about those terrifying monsters from mercenaries and Antolians. Nonsense. Don't those things only stay in Antolia? I don't know, but I did find traces of those monsters in the territory. The knight said in panic, "I went to check today, and many serfs were torn to pieces by those hounds." Hearing this, the Count of Greywater Castle was immediately shocked. "Close the city gate. Close the city gate quickly. From now on, no one can be allowed into the city. But the people outside the city. I told you to close the city gate immediately." The fat count suddenly stood up and slapped the long table in front of him. The wine glass instantly fell over, and the deep red wine soaked the tablecloth. "Yes." Seeing this, the knight quickly responded. As for the lives of the people in the territory, the nobles and the commoners are two different worlds. At least in the eyes of the Earl of Greywater Castle, the safety of the nobles is the only factor that needs to be considered. As for those unarmed commoners living outside the city, what awaits them is only the slaughter from the plateau hounds. However, simply closing the city gates obviously cannot stop the invasion of the plateau hounds. Compared with the experienced Antolians, the nobles in the north lack even the most basic knowledge of the plateau hounds. This city has neither the strong and heavy walls like the Thorn territory, nor the soldiers who are good at fighting. It is a problem for the pot-bellied knights to even lift their swords, let alone let them wear armor, hold swords, and fight those ferocious monsters in close combat. Even though the Earl, who cherishes his life, has already sent more soldiers to patrol, the swarming hounds still climbed into the city without hindrance that night. For a whole night, this small city was almost shrouded by the roar of hounds and the wailing of common people. When the morning light finally dispelled the dark night, the air of Greywater Castle was already filled with a bloody smell. The hounds had retreated, but the Earl of Greywater Castle, Eli Wayne, had long lost the desire to drink. After the city wall was breached by the hounds, he could only hide in his lord's castle under the protection of the knights. As for the people of Greywater Castle, those who were agile could still flee, but more people could only hide in their rooms, or had already died under the bite of the hounds. Eli Wayne looked out the window and saw countless corpses lying in a pool of blood. In just one night, Greywater Castle, which was still calm yesterday, had become like a purgatory on earth. Ugh! Looking at the situation outside the window, the Earl Eli Wayne felt his stomach churning, and then he vomited violently. The undigested food and bile in the stomach spread on the carpet in a pool, emitting a disgusting smell. My Lord Earl, what should we do now? The faces of the knights were full of panic. The horror of last night had already been deeply engraved in their hearts. Although the hounds had retreated, the strong fear had already destroyed their fighting spirit. Go find reinforcements. Go find reinforcements. The Count of Greywater Castle said in horror. Where to go? The leading knight asked hurriedly. Go everywhere. Go to the Sunken Wood Forest. Go to Antolia. Go to Parma City to find the Duke of Galicia. The Count of Greywater Castle shouted angrily. He didn't know where there was no hound attack, let alone where to bring reinforcements. Did the appearance of the plateau hounds mean that the Thorn territory in the south had been destroyed? Did the rest of the nobles suffer the same disaster? Eli Wayne didn't know. To be precise, he had never known anything about the plateau hounds, and he had never expected that these ferocious monsters would leave the land of Antolia. For a whole winter, he was intoxicated by alcohol and enjoyed the nobles' delicacies in his castle. So, at this moment, the Earl's brain had already stopped working, and all that was left was endless panic. Chapter 20 Loyalty. After a fierce battle, Antolia ushered in a long-lost peace. Even though the hounds retreated, the people living on this land were only slightly relieved. The civilians didn't know why the Highland hounds, which were particularly strong in the past, retreated in embarrassment after only one invasion this year. But both Leon and Aaron knew it very well in their hearts. Compared with the bloody battles in the Thorn territory, the Greywater Castle and the Sunken Wood Forest in the north are far away, but the fragile defense that will fall down at the touch will obviously attract more attention from the Highland hounds. In the year of the Jackdaw, there will definitely be continuous deaths before the Highland hounds are killed or injured. As the Viscount of Antolia, the only thing Leon can do is to reduce the casualties in Antolia. He certainly knows that as the Highland hounds go north, countless civilians will lose their lives. But between other people and his own people, Leon will undoubtedly choose to protect his own people. That is why, even though he knew that the plateau hounds had already set their sights on the north, Leon did not want the people to relax before everything was over. Moreover, this was obviously something that could not be said publicly. Could it be that because he felt that the nobles in the north had been watching from the sidelines, he had to drag them into the water? This was obviously not in line with the ethics of the nobles. The previous arduous battle had dealt a heavy blow to Antolia's military power, but fortunately this was Antolia, and the difficult living environment allowed most people to become qualified warriors with just a little training. In addition, the Thorn territory now had plenty of food, so Leon simply summoned the men in the city for daily military training. Although the intensity and content of the training were not much different from the military training of college students in the previous life, in this era, being able to mobilize all the male people in the territory was already a miracle on Earth. And this was exactly why Leon was full of hope for his territory. Although Anatolia is poor and remote, its tough folk customs and strong military strength are enough to make León have a place among the many nobles of the Andal Kingdom. Otherwise, even if there is a fabric like moonlight velvet, León may not dare to sell it. For several days in a row, León's figure appeared either in his lord's castle or in the wounded camp in the northwest corner of the city. Those lying there are all warriors who fought bloody battles for Anatolia, and the lives of each of them are precious. The arrival of the lord excited the wounded. After all, not every lord is willing to come here in person to visit those ordinary people who are already on the verge of death. Fortunately, perhaps because the Anatolians are strong and healthy, or perhaps because the sterilization and disinfection of strong liquor has played a role, the death rate of the wounded has been reduced to a level that makes the wounded themselves a little at a loss. Especially for the mercenaries of Anatolia, getting injured is a normal thing for those brave warriors who conquer everywhere. That is why they know the chance of survival after being injured better than the recruits. Looking at the lord who bandaged his wounds personally, Stein choked for a while. "My lord Viscount. Lie down well." León pushed Stein, who was about to get up, back to the bed. While bandaging the wounds, he said, "You are all loyal guards defending Anatolia and the most important force of the Ximena family." "My lord Viscount." Stein couldn't help but squeeze out a tear from his eyes. At this moment, the young lord in front of him seemed to be emitting a 1,000-foot light. León can shine. The arrival of the lord excited the injured soldiers, and León also walked tirelessly to each bed, carefully checking the wounds for the soldiers. He was not a medical student, but he still had basic medical knowledge. Moreover, the military doctors of this era might not be as good as a time traveler like León. So, come every day, come every day. The wounded soldiers saw the Lord's actions, and all they could do was to keep the word loyalty in their hearts. Loyalty. In addition to visiting the wounded, León also gave important instructions to the doctors and civilians who took care of the wounded. He emphasized that Anatolia should build a good system for treating the wounded in the future, pay attention to cold and warm, adhere to first-class standards, and eliminate the soldiers' worries. He also pointed out that whether it was a recruit or a mercenary, they were all defenders of Anatolia and warriors worthy of respect. The soldiers should be allowed to recover well and rest assured, and he extended his greetings of victory to the soldiers. Walking out of the wounded camp slowly, León seemed to feel a sense of joy like the sun after the rain. Although the cruelty of winter has not yet passed, the Thorn territory has finally overcome the most difficult hurdle under his leadership. Aaron. Walking on the streets of Anatolia, León suddenly shouted, "Respected Viscount." Aaron on the side hurried forward and listened carefully to his lord's instructions. "How is the population census in Anatolia going?" "It has been completed more than half, and it should be completed in 3 days." Aaron answered truthfully. Just a few days ago, taking advantage of the opportunity to count the names of wounded and dead soldiers after the war, León simply asked his old butler to do a population survey of all the people living in Thorn territory. The information surveyed was also very simple, nothing more than some simple information such as name, gender, address, relatives, and the current means of livelihood and the skills they have mastered. Only by understanding the population can we know how much tax to collect, and only then can León truly understand the current population situation and occupational distribution of Thorn territory. Before long, the chaotic situation in Greywater Castle and other places will surely cause a large number of refugees to flee. By then, Anatolia will inevitably usher in the largest influx of population in several years. What? You said that Anatolia is notorious and no one wants to come? It doesn't matter. The mercenaries' battle axe will make the refugees make the right choice. That's why León planned to take advantage of the time when the residents gathered in the city to conduct a census. Only by sorting out the situation of his own people first can León have an overall judgment on how to collect refugees. However, the efficiency of the census made León a little uncomfortable. There are only about 3,000 people in the Thorn territory, and it has not been completed after nearly a week. Reporting to the Viscount, it is mainly because most of the people in the territory can't read and write, which delayed it. Aaron explained hurriedly. Hearing this, León had to nod his head to show his understanding. The education level of the people in Anatolia is basically the level of prenatal education. Of course, it is not just Anatolia. The cultural level of the people in the noble territories of the entire Andal Kingdom is surprisingly consistent. Even after traveling for many years, León still couldn't help but sigh in his heart about the primitiveness and backwardness of this world. You know, In some places outside the Andal Kingdom, even the bad custom of the rite of first night is still widely existed, and some have evolved into many jaw-dropping customs, which is in line with Leon's stereotype of this world. Transition chapter, Kiu follows. Chapter 21, Walking into Trap. The moonlight in winter is exceptionally cold and bright, casting a hazy halo in the night. From time to time, the hoarse cries of jackdaws can be heard outside the city, like the cry of a baby, which is particularly sharp in the night. In the city, compared with the hustle and bustle of the day, the only sound of looms can be heard in the textile workshops in the Thorn territory at night, and occasionally the creaking sound of patrolling soldiers stepping on the snow can be heard. Juan is leading a patrol team composed of dozens of militiamen and hunters, walking on the roads in the Thorn territory, looking at the surrounding streets and houses with vigilant eyes from time to time. The cold winter has not yet passed, and no one dares to let down the guard. This is especially true for Juan. Just a month ago, he was just helping a butcher, responsible for handling the prey that was shot by arrows sent by hunters. So for him, these days always have a sense of unreality. Unlike other strong recruits, Juan, who is a little thin, was lucky enough to become a member of the Antolia Fire volunteer team because he signed up early. Then, the young lord brought out a whole set of training methods that everyone found extremely strange. Although he was puzzled, Juan did not dare to be careless at all. For him, it was already a very lucky thing to be a member of this team. If he was kicked out of the team because of insufficient training or being too weak, it would be too late to regret. Therefore, he took every training seriously, and for his weaknesses, after the extremely strict and arduous daily training, he would even quietly increase the intensity. Perhaps it was for this reason that when the plateau hounds outside the city rushed towards Antolia like a dark cloud, Juan was already a leader in the Antolia Fire volunteer team. That day, when the hounds broke through the city, Juan was also panicked and flustered, but the nearly 1 month of training and the strong determination to prove himself made him rush to the gap in the city wall without hesitation. He was lucky not to become a member of the wounded camp, and even killed several Highland hounds with his own hands regardless of his life. So, now Juan was promoted to the captain of this 10-man team, responsible for the night patrol in the city of Thorn territory. The snow on the roads in the city has not been cleared, and some places even have footprints of Highland hounds that jumped into the city during the hard battle a few days ago. Although the soldiers are trying their best to keep the hounds out of the city, there will always be fish that slip through the net that cannot be intercepted in such a large city. And this is also the main reason why the civilians in the territory also suffered more than 100 casualties. There is no light in the Thorn territory at night. Although it is in the city, it can only rely on the moonlight in the sky and the torches in the hands of the soldiers to observe the surroundings. Juan was walking in front, and suddenly he felt the soldier behind him tug at his sleeve, and said in a low voice, "Boss, there is movement ahead." Hearing this, Juan immediately became alert and reached for the weapon at his waist. Juan was already familiar with several people in the patrol team. The soldier who just reminded him was a famous hunter in Antolia before he became a militiaman, and he was particularly alert to any disturbance. The Viscount had already issued a curfew order, so theoretically speaking, there should be no figures on the street except them. Holding his breath and concentrating, there was indeed a creaking sound of footsteps on the snow not far away. Several people moved cautiously in the direction of the sound, and under the reflection of the moonlight, the weapons in their hands flashed a hint of coldness. Perhaps the figure also heard the footsteps of the patrol team. In a moment, a figure suddenly rushed out from the shadows on one side of the road and ran wildly in the opposite direction. It was obviously a person. This also made the tense soldiers feel a little relieved. "Stop!" Juan shouted, and the patrol team followed closely, chasing the figure in the direction of escape. "Where is ahead?" "Ahead is." The soldier on the side was about to speak, but saw the fast-moving figure nimbly climb over the nearly 2-meter-high wooden fence and successfully break into the camp of the Antolian militia. The panting patrol soldiers looked at the wall in front of them, and then looked at each other, feeling a little overloaded, and for a moment they couldn't figure out why the figure wanted to fall into the trap. Then, there was a loud noise of thunder and clang in the camp, and a shout resounded through the night sky, "Where did you come from, you thief, to dare to break into the military camp?" Although he saw that the Merity was about to get hit the fort of a sleeping soldier, Juan adjusted his mentality immediately and ordered his soldiers, "Go. Report to Lord Todd. Plateau hounds are really not delicious." This is the conclusion Leon came to after his first try. Not only is it very dry, but it also has a fishy smell, and it is cooked in plain water, which is really not to Leon's appetite. So, when Todd stepped into the Lord's castle, the generous Lord Leon gave the breakfast in front of him to this old friend who worked hard for Anatolia. "Thank you for your gift, my generous lord." Todd accepted all the offers, and with hatred for the plateau hounds, he bit off a piece of meat from the bone. What's up? At this moment, Todd should have been training new soldiers in the barracks, or checking fortifications on the city wall. Now he came here, he must not just come to get a bite of the bad breakfast. Last night, the patrol caught a thief. Leon couldn't help but be a little surprised. You know, maybe because mercenaries often develop side jobs before, in the minds of Anatolians, stealing is a more serious crime than robbery. Who is it? Leon put down the knife and fork in his hand and asked in a deep voice. The Thorn territory has just experienced a fierce battle. If someone wants to take advantage of this opportunity to fish in troubled waters, Leon doesn't mind letting this person feel the iron fist of the nobles. That person is not your territory. Todd said truthfully. Huh? Last night, the patrol found this guy in the city, and then this person was in a panic and climbed over the wall to the barracks. Todd was a little amused and helpless about this. After all, this luck was really a bit outrageous. Not my people? How did they get in? Leon was a little confused. No one would want to come to Anatolia to experience a hound siege, right? Todd paused and replied, that person is a mountain dweller, or a wild man. If the number of investors reaches 100, Gideon will give some coins. If you are interested, you can click on the app introduction page, it's free. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, First Contact with the Laprux. The people living on the land of Anatolia are not only the people of the Thorn territory. In addition to the Thorn territory, there are countless backward tribes regarded as wild men by the Andal kingdom in the vast forests and continuous mountains of Anatolia. However, the Anatolians still prefer to call these people mountain people. After all, the definition of wild men in the Andal kingdom is more based on whether they believe in gods and whether they follow the scriptures of the church. But the Anatolians also have no habit of believing in gods, so in the minds of many Andals, the Anatolians are actually no different from wild men. Mountain people. Leon seemed a little surprised by this answer. Although he has always been very aware of the existence of mountain people, in fact, this is the first time Leon has met a big living mountain man. How many mountain tribes are there in the mountains of Anatolia? How do the mountain people survive? How do they spend the winter? These are the questions in Leon's mind. They don't have city walls, so how do they survive the invasion of island hounds? With a little curiosity, Leon immediately asked Todd to carry the guy he caught that night to the Lord's castle. The life of the mountain man is also a life. You can't do this to me. While being dragged and pushed by the mercenaries, the mountain man who had obviously been tortured screamed loudly. They all had the same head, 2 eyes, 1 mouth, and were equally strong and tall. Leon carefully observed for a long time, but he really couldn't see any difference between the mountain man in front of him and his own people. Is this guy really a mountain man? Could it be that he called himself a mountain man after being caught, hoping that he would be punished lightly so as not to surprise his friends? Todd seemed to see the doubt in Leon's heart, and immediately asked the mercenaries guarding this man to start stripping this guy's clothes. There was a tearing sound, and a tuft of hairy chest hair suddenly came out of the man's shirt. But this is not the most important thing. When the mercenaries knocked the man down, they saw a strange pattern painted on his back with colorful paint. Laprux. Leon blurted out when he saw the strange but strangely familiar pattern. Huh? At the same time, the mountain people who were knocked to the ground by the mercenaries trembled all over, and there was a trace of confusion in their surprised eyes. Seeing this, Leon immediately understood. Although his face was still calm, his heart was already stirred. He recognized the pattern. To be precise, Leon had seen the pattern in the books of the ancient archives. It was the totem of the Laprux. As for why Leon could accurately identify the symbol of the Laprux among the 72 ancestral tribes recorded in the archives, it was not because Leon had an outstanding memory, but because the pattern was too special. It was like an enlarged version of a raccoon. However, according to the name of the ancestors, it should be called a bear otter, A fat creature with black eye circles, white face and gray fur. Who are you? The mountain man who was shouting loudly before suddenly panicked, and asked hurriedly without paying attention to the two strong men weighing more than 200 pounds pressing on him. Although the people of the Thorn territory and the mountain people of Anatolia knew each other's existence, the relationship between the two could not be said to be close, and it could basically be said that they would never have any contact with each other. And now, the first sentence spoken by the young man in front of him made him feel a little confused. León Ximena, the patriarch of the Ximena family, the ruler of the Thorn territory and the entire Anatolia. León asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" The man did not answer, but stared at Leon's face with his eyes, as if he was still digesting the shock brought by Leon's recognition of the tribal totem and shouting out the name of the tribe at a glance. Reporting to the Viscount, "We have interrogated this man last night. He is obviously just a thief, but he is really a tough guy and won't say anything no matter what." "I am not a thief." Hearing this, the man immediately tried his best to argue. "Then tell me the purpose of your coming to the Thorn territory." "I believe that the priest of your tribe will not be soft on a thief," León said coldly. After hearing the word priest, the mountain man seemed to lose his temper suddenly. Although he was still struggling under the mercenary, his tone had softened. Then I will tell you, but you have to tell me why you recognize our totem." Seeing this, Todd couldn't help but be dumbfounded. "You know, for most of the night yesterday, the mercenaries took turns to fight, but they didn't get anything useful from this person. His lord's only a few words seemed to have broken through this person's psychological defense. As for what the laprix are, Todd didn't know, but he knew that his lord was too strong. After asking the waiter to take notes, León asked simply, "Name?" "Andrew Laprook." "Gender?" As soon as he finished speaking, Andrew seemed to feel insulted and stared at León in front of him. "Don't get me wrong," León explained considerately. "Being biologically male doesn't mean being psychologically male. Although I think you are a male, I don't know your self-perception. If we really want to classify it, maybe we can come up with 97 different genders." 97. Todd on the side suddenly widened his eyes. Are the nobles now playing so hard? Of course. León suddenly became interested and explained with emotion. For example, Novagender, which is called an indescribable gender, believes that her gender cannot be described in human language. Maverick, which is called a lone ranger, believes that her gender cannot be mixed with humans. Pangender, which is called pansexual, belongs to the type that has a gender everywhere. In addition, there are male. I am a male. Andrew felt that his ears were being destroyed, and he shouted loudly, and even emphasized, "I am definitely a male." "Okay." León curled his lips, ended the topic with some reluctance, and then changed the subject and asked sternly, "Then, Mr. Andrew, please tell me what is your purpose in coming to the Thorn territory?" Andrew paused, and when he thought of the fact that León had recognized his tribe through the totem on his back, he made up his mind and said reluctantly, "The last otter in the tribe died. We have no food for the winter. The brothers who came down the mountain a few days ago saw your food cart." Chapter 23 Warmstone. "What?" Before Andrew finished speaking, Todd jumped up from his chair excitedly, grabbed Andrew's collar, and shouted angrily, "Say it again. Are you trying to take the food?" Never have any bad thoughts about the food of the Antolians, because this is a taboo in the hearts of every Antolian. The most lacking thing in this land is food. If it is money that is robbed, the Antolians will probably be angry and hold a grudge. But if it is food, no matter how far, no matter how difficult it is, the Antolians will fight him to the death. "No. I didn't." Andrew waved his hands repeatedly, struggling to beg for mercy. "Todd, let him go, let him finish." Seeing that Andrew in front of him was almost strangling Todd to the point of suffocation, León had to speak out to stop him. It was not until he heard Leon's order that Todd let go of his hand and let go of the mountain man who was almost suffocated. "Huh?" Andrew gasped for air and lay on the ground for a long time before he recovered. He immediately found the key point, fearing that Todd would hide him again. "Trade? I am the envoy of the Laprux. We want to exchange food with you. We have never thought of stealing or robbing food from you." "Oh." Hearing this, León couldn't help but get interested. "How do you want to trade?" Andrew couldn't help but smile bitterly, secretly glance at Todd sitting next to him, and then said carefully, "The things I carry with me have been taken away by that adult. I hope you can." "Todd." León gestured. Seeing his lord's statement, Todd ordered the mercenaries present the things they had searched from Andrew before to Leon. Houndtooth dagger. Wild beast fur. That's the fur of the bear otter. It's the most precious treasure of the Laprik people. When it comes to the tribal totem, Andrew immediately refuted. Okay, the fur of the bear otter. Leon nodded in cooperation. While rummaging through the pile of messy objects, he casually asked, "What do you want to exchange?" This. For a moment, Andrew was a little speechless. Going to the Thorn territory to exchange food was a task assigned to him by the priest of the tribe. However, when sneaking into the Thorn territory, he had clearly seen the corpses of the hounds hanging on the city wall, which meant that the original idea of using the canine tooth dagger and other objects for trading was probably aborted. Honorable Viscount, do you see that round stone? After thinking for a moment, Andrew finally opened his chips. This. Leon raised an oval round stone about the size of a fist and asked with a little doubt. To be honest, apart from the ones he had read out before, Leon actually didn't know the functions of other things, let alone seen them. That's why he asked Andrew to tell him, so that he wouldn't miss anything good. Yes. Andrew nodded quickly. This round stone is the basis for the Laprik people to survive the cold winter in the mountains. Oh. How did the mountain people survive the cold winter? This has always been a question that Leon was quite curious about. Now, according to Andrew's words, the answer seems to be on this stone. Thinking of this, Leon couldn't help but carefully observe this round stone that looked a bit strange. The surface of the stone was a series of ripples like waves. Such a strange texture can be roughly attributed to the magic of nature. The Laprik people call it a warm stone. Andrew said truthfully. Warm stone. Hearing this, Leon couldn't help but put his hands on the surface of the round stone. Instantly, a biting chill penetrated into Leon's palms. You call this a warm stone? My Lord Viscount, you need to use a knife or a hammer to knock a notch or crack on the surface of this stone. Andrew explained hurriedly, fearing that he would displease the nobles in front of him. Todd naturally couldn't let his lord do it himself, so he took the initiative to step forward, laid it flat on the ground, and then chopped the warm stone hard with the battle axe at his waist. At the moment the battle axe fell, accompanied by the sound of stone breaking, a wide crack appeared on the surface of the warm stone, releasing an orange-red color like the scorching sun in summer. With the warm stone as the center, everyone within a 5-meter diameter felt a burst of heat. It was a kind of warmth that should not exist in the cold winter, a temperature and change that was difficult to understand. Oh. This is such a waste. Looking at the half-length cut of the warm stone, Andrew couldn't help but feel distressed. If one person uses it, only 1 centimeter of opening is enough. At this time, Leon obviously didn't care about Andrew's complaints. He walked straight towards the warm stone, feeling the heat and warmth spreading from it. Including Todd, everyone present stared at the glowing stone with wide eyes. Even though they have lived on this land for a long time, they have never seen this thing called warm stone before them. How long can this warm stone last? Leon asked curiously. If it is just a small cut of about 1 centimeter, it can probably be used for nearly a month, but if it is split into the current shape, it will only continue to heat for about a week in total. How do you want to exchange it? 1 warm stone in exchange for the same weight of food. Andrew replied quickly. Impossible. Leon shook his head very firmly. Warming stones are good, but if they are only used for heating, both myself and the people can use firewood instead. Although Leon vaguely felt that this thing might have other uses, it was obvious that the mountain people did not know, so it was naturally impossible for Andrew to ask for a high price. After thinking for a long time, in Andrew's anxious eyes, Leon finally said, Actually, I have another plan. Please speak, Lord Viscount. Andrew said he was all ears. You are short of food, but we have it. Yes. In that case, as long as your tribe voluntarily becomes a vassal of the Ximena family, the Lapriks will naturally enjoy the same treatment as my subjects. For example, spend this winter safely. Hearing this, Andrew was shocked. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. The Lapriks have their own priests and totems. They will never become slaves of others. Leon smiled and said, Not slaves, but subjects. They are subjects who have personal freedom and are blessed by both the Ximena family and your totems. This chapter says that it has not been restored yet. Chapter 24 Mountain People. The meeting was obviously not pleasant, but a frank exchange at best. Leon knew very well that Andrew was just a stone thrown by the mountain people to test the waters. At best, He could only be regarded as a mouthpiece to test the Ximena family, and could not really make a decision. Andrew was also surprised by the conditions offered by Leon. He felt that the young Viscount in front of him had too big an appetite and wanted to put the brave Laprix under his command. However, although the deal was not concluded, the two sides reached a consensus on maintaining communication in the future. The mountain people wanted to get enough food from the Thorn territory to survive the winter, and Leon also wanted to take this opportunity to let the influence of the Ximena family penetrate into every corner of Anatolia. In general, it can be regarded as a good start. Andrew sent warm stones to the Thorn territory, and Leon also asked Andrew to send a letter to the priest of the Laprix. As for the question raised by Andrew why Leon recognized the totem of the Laprix, Leon never gave a definite answer from beginning to end. In his opinion, creating an illusion for the Ximena family that they know a lot about the mountain people may be more beneficial to the subsequent negotiations. I hope the Laprix will not disappoint the conditions I set for them, Leon murmured as he watched Andrew leave the room. Todd, since one found the person, let him send him back. Understood. Todd's heart trembled, and he quickly responded. Obviously, the boy named Juan was remembered by his lord, otherwise he would not be so important. You know, this is the first contact between the Thorn territory and the Laprix. And with both parties willing, this matter is not difficult to handle. After returning smoothly, it will definitely be a credit. At this time, Leon did not want to continue to enjoy breakfast. He picked up a white bread that looked good on the table, and went upstairs and returned to his room. With a change of mind, he pulled the book that he had seen in the ancient archives in front of him. Asgard Chronicles. This is a history book that records the past of the ancestors. Asgard, this is the place located on the other side of the mountains, with Aran as the capital, but now it is shrouded in black fog. Leon had read this book before, but he was not as devoted as studying ancient magic. It was a bit like reading online articles after work and study, but he didn't expect that a casual glance by chance would make Leon recognize the totem drawn on Andrew's back. The book records the origin of Asgard, a country jointly established by 72 tribes of ancestors. And Lapric, the tribe with a bear otter as the totem, is one of the 72 tribes of ancestors. For the mountain people living in Anatolia, Leon's original ideal was actually non-interference. Since the mountain people didn't come to disturb him, he didn't necessarily have to provoke the mountain people in the early stage. However, the appearance of Andrew made Leon change his mind. That's the Lapric people, the descendants of the ancestors of Asgard. The location of Anatolia determines that if Leon wants to expand, he can only develop to the west and south, but this will inevitably get closer to the lost land filled with black fog. The unique identity of the Laprix naturally made Leon really want to recruit them. Even after thousands of years, the past has dissipated like smoke, but if the brave and warlike Laprix can join him, it will definitely bring great benefits to his rule over Anatolia. After all, let alone crossing the continuous mountains to the south, even if Anatolia is the hereditary fief of the Ximena family, his understanding of this land may not be comparable to those tribes living in the mountains. The previous warm stone is a good example. The mountain people rely on winter, but he doesn't know it at all. Of course, Leon also knows that Andrew still has reservations. Because the warm stone can at most make the mountain people not afraid of the severe cold, but it is impossible to drive away the plateau hounds with just the stone that can heat up. The mountain people must have some means to keep the plateau hounds away. Therefore, even if they cannot get the loyalty of the Laprix, they must get a way to expel the plateau hounds, so that the Thorn territory can solve the hidden dangers brought by the plateau hounds once and for all. And such an offer is obviously not a decision that Andrew, as an envoy, can make alone. I hope the current situation of the Laprix is really as difficult as Andrew said. Leon looked at the warm stone that he had placed on the table and thought helplessly. The south of Anatolia has continuous mountains and dense forests, but Andrew is already familiar with it. He was born in the mountains and forests and lives in the mountains and forests. He knows how to identify the direction surrounded by mountains and how to hide his tracks in the woods. However, compared with Andrew's flexibility, one seems not so smooth. This is one's first time to go up the mountain. As the altitude increases, the air on the mountain is not getting fresher, but it makes people feel a little uncomfortable. Because here, what permeates the forest is not soft clouds, but a thin layer of black fog, which gives people an extremely depressing and dull feeling. Finally, when passing through the dense thorns and vines, the familiar camp came into view. But at this moment, The originally noisy camp is no longer as lively as before. Andrew. Some mountain people recognized the figure of the person coming and couldn't help but shout excitedly. The excited shouting attracted a large number of disheveled mountain people. The men were strong and the women were big and round. But no matter how strong their bodies were, they couldn't hide their weakness and hunger at the moment. Soon someone saw one following Andrew. Who is that? Andrew. The mountain people present suddenly became nervous, and some even held their battle axes tightly in their hands. He is the guard of León Ximena, the Viscount of the Thorn territory. He brought a letter from the Ximena family and wanted to present it to the priest in person. Seeing that the situation seemed to be developing in a bad direction, Andrew shouted hurriedly. Hearing this, the mountain people present breathed a sigh of relief, but their eyes were still alert. Andrew, did you bring back the news from the mountain? An old man holding a wooden stick walked over tremblingly in the crowd, and the surrounding mountain people quickly stepped aside to make way. The old man's gray beard almost fell to his waist, and his hunched body seemed to be shaky. Honorable priest. Seeing the old man coming, Andrew hurried forward and paid high respect to the wise man of the tribe. Fast Lapruk. The priest of the Lapruk people, the owner of the last bear otter of the Lapruk tribe. Chapter 25 Leon's true identity. Since arriving at this camp, one has been observing everything around him. The camp in front of him is very simple, even extremely crude. This camp has no walls at all. The surrounding walls are a long empty meat drying rack and wild animal bones everywhere. The houses in the camp are also quite simple. It seems that in the minds of the mountain people, the house does not need to be strong, as long as it can be lived in. Perhaps it is because of this concept that some so-called houses are even just shacks built entirely with thatch and branches. And these mountain people, called Lapruks by their lords, are obviously brave and good at fighting. Both men and women have countless scars and scratches on their bodies. Even though these people look extremely hungry at this time, one has no doubt that the strength of the mountain people in front of him is completely comparable to the mercenaries of the Thorn territory. Priest of the Lapruks, on behalf of Viscount León Ximena of Antolia, I extend my greetings to you on our first meeting. One's brain was working rapidly, trying to recall the phrases he had just learned before coming here. After that, he handed the letter in his hand to Andrew, who passed it to the elderly priest. In the wooden house in the middle of the camp, Andrew and the priest were sitting opposite each other. Andrew described everything he saw and heard during this trip down the mountain, and told the truth about everything he saw in the Thorn territory. That is to say, although the price was too high, the young Viscount did not reject our idea of exchanging food, right? Yes. Andrew nodded, but said a little angrily, but the request he made was to make the Lapruks his subjects. This is really wishful thinking. However, to Andrew's surprise, the priest in front of him did not criticize Leon's proposal, but fell into silence. Master Priest, you won't. For a moment, Andrew was a little panicked. The last bear otter of the tribe died. The priest, who was always wise in Andrew's impression, sighed a lot and said a little lonely. The bear otter is not only the totem of the Lapruk people, but also the guardian beast and companion of the Lapruk people, and the omen of the rise and fall of the tribe. Just like this cold winter, even if it is the year of the jackdaw, the Lapruk people should have survived smoothly. However, the sudden black fog dispersed the wild beasts in the mountains and forests and withered the fruits planted in spring. The mountain people want to get meat through hunting, so they have to travel through mountains and rivers to go down the mountain to find the prey that has long been hunted by the plateau hounds. And using this method to obtain food is undoubtedly extremely difficult. If the tribe has a small number of people, it would be fine, but the Lapruk people are one of the largest tribes among the mountain people, with a total population of more than 1,000. Therefore, for the first time in this cold winter, the Lapruk people encountered a food crisis that they had never experienced before. Only when people have endured hunger can they understand the value of food. At this time, the mountain people can be said to be all hungry, and they have already reached the point of being penniless. The meat obtained from hunting is even more difficult to fill everyone's stomach. The lord down the mountain has not made a decision on the use of warm stones for trading. If you go in person, maybe he will agree. Too late. The priest shook his head helplessly. Why? Andrew asked, puzzled. Because you personally brought a Viscount's guards into the camp and led them to the mountains. When the little guy named Juan goes back, the young Viscount will know the situation in the camp and our location clearly. By then, even if we don't change, maybe they will choose to take it themselves. The priest looked at the young man in front of him and sighed helplessly. Living in the mountains and forests for a long time, when it comes to the tricks in their stomachs, the new generation of young people in the Laprik tribe are obviously no match for those nobles down the mountain. What? Hearing this, Andrew was immediately shocked. I'll go and kill that man right now. Stop. The old priest shouted, if you kill him now, the possibility of exchanging food will be completely gone. At that time, at least half of the tribe will die of hunger. What should I do? Andrew was a little panicked for a moment and fell to the ground. The priest did not answer his question, but opened the letter from León Ximena, Viscount of Antolia. Not only Andrew, he was also curious about why the Lord could recognize the tribal totem of the Laprik people. There were only 2 very simple words in the letter, but the old priest suddenly trembled violently. Priest. Andrew hurriedly came forward, but inadvertently saw the short words written by León in the letter. Within 3 years, we will cross the mountains. Within 10 years, we will see the ruins of Aaron. I would like to extend a sincere invitation to the descendants of the ancestors of Asgard, the wise men and priests of the Lapriks, Viscount Antolia, León Ximena. Master Priest, what is Asgard? Andrew asked in confusion, looking at the series of difficult words in the letter. The old priest did not answer Andrew's question, but stared at the contents of the letter, as if he remembered the words of the 37th priest of the Lapriks before he became a priest. Remember, we are the descendants of the ancestors. One day, the Lapriks will pass through the black fog and return to the land of the past. At this moment, the priest's mind was lingering with countless questions and filled with memories of the past. This was the first time in all these years since he became a priest that he heard a familiar place name from someone else and heard about the past of the Lapriks. So, how much does the Viscount León Ximena know about the Lapriks? And why does he know about the land on the other side of the mountains? Is that young man really the Viscount of the Ximena family? Is there a possibility that he is also a descendant of the ancestors? Yes, it must be like this. Because apart from this, he really can't think of any other possibility. And if that's the case, wouldn't the Lapriks have found an organization? I'm going to visit that Viscount in person. After a long silence, the priest finally spoke. Crossing the mountains and passing through the black fog. This has always been the wish of the Lapriks priests from generation to generation, and it is also the reason why they have always lived on the edge of the lost land and never left. No matter what happens when he goes down the mountain this time, Fast, as a priest of the tribe, has decided to go. Because this is not only about the past of the Lapriks, but also about the future of the tribe. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.